If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 121, Title, Honorable Night, 2 in 1 chapter. After the windstorm disappeared and another night passed, the elemental flow as well as the circulation of the ley lines in the vicinity had slowly returned to normal. Therefore, once it was confirmed that guiding lightning elements and using spatial transfer magic would not be interfered with, Lisa took out what looked like a book-shaped catalyst weapon. Nolan looked at the appearance of the tool, and if he remembered correctly, it should be the exclusive 4-star weapon of the Knights of Favonius, the Favonius Codex. It seemed that even Lisa needed the boost of a weapon to make the magical transfer back to Mondstadt easier. The Favonius Codex floated by Lisa's side, its pages flipping automatically as if being blown by a gust of wind. A purple magic circle, flashing with electric light, unfolded beneath Lisa's feet as she stood wearing black high heels. The deep purple gemstones on the back of her feet, wrapped in black stockings, also reflected the constantly jumping lightning elements. "All right, little adventurer, it's time for us to go back," Lisa said, pressing the brim of her hat slightly to shade the sunlight shining on her emerald-like eyes. Nolan nodded and moved closer to Lisa's side, stepping on the magic formation together. Suddenly, a purple lightning flashed, enveloping the two, and the next moment, a breeze brushed by, leaving only scattered electric lights in the air. At this moment, the sky over Mondstadt had cleared up. Lumen and Paimon, who had just returned, accompanied the acting Grand Master Jean back to the Knights of Favonius headquarters. Amber, as a scouting knight, hadn't returned to Mondstadt city yet and was helping to clear the monsters around the city. "Really, I still think that foolhardy diplomat from Snezhnia is too arrogant. They clearly don't regard the Knights of Favonius highly at all. It's obvious they have ill intentions." Paimon floated in the air, stomping her foot indignantly. When they returned and met the acting Grand Master Jean, they found her being challenged by an arrogant woman wearing a mask that covered only her eyes. The Snezhnian envoy questioned the Knights of Favonius' ability to handle crises, even going as far as implying a connection to the city's defenses and the killing of one of the 4 Winds, the Storm Dragon, Storm Terror. Truly worthy of being the most powerful diplomatic envoy on the continent of Teyvat, there was reason to believe that they had something in mind. Storm Terror, as one of Mondstadt's 4 Winds, had encountered some problems now. But if it were to be killed, Mondstadt would permanently lose a powerful guardian. In the case where it could be salvaged, it would be best to find out the cause of Storm Terror's irrationality and resolve it, allowing it to once again become the dragon of the Eastwind that protects Mondstadt. They covet the power of the Inmo Archon's attendant, but no matter what, the Knights of Favonius won't let them succeed. The acting Grand Master Jean's white high-heeled boots made a crisp sound as they landed on the brick ground. The golden patterns on the sides of her tight leggings reflected slightly under the sunlight. She rubbed her temples with her snow-white fingers, sighing, "By the way, traveler, you mentioned something for me to see, is it something special?" On the way back to the Knights of Favonius headquarters, Lumen decided to hand over the red crystal she had found in the forest to the Knights of Favonius. Because it was discovered when she and Paimon encountered Storm Terror, it might be helpful in resolving the crisis caused by Storm Terror. She and Paimon briefly explained what had happened, but omitted the encounter with a person wearing a green outfit at the same time. Because they felt that person didn't seem like a bad person, mentioning it might accidentally cause the Knights of Favonius to misunderstand and issue a wanted order or something. "I see," the red-colored crystals left behind by the Storm Terror. As they stepped onto the stairs leading into the Knights of Favonius headquarters hall, acting Grand Master's cape also swayed slightly, revealing a glimpse of her snow-white back. She stroked her fair and soft chin, pondering for a moment before saying, "I'm not good at researching these things. If Lisa..." Before she could finish her sentence, a purple magic circle suddenly unfolded in the Knights of Favonius hall, and 2 figures emerged from the flickering lightning. "Oh my, it seems like someone's been thinking about me. Any clues, Jean?" Lisa took a few steps forward, her long lace-edged black stockings swaying as she approached, a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Lisa, Nolan, you're back too. What a cool way to make an entrance." Paimon's starry eyes sparkled with excitement. "Lisa, you guys came back just in time." Jean nodded lightly, and with a sway of her golden ponytail, she led them into the acting Grand Master's office. Then Lumen took out the red-colored crystal that was flowing with a gloomy light, and it just floated silently in front of everyone's eyes. "This is the thing." Lumen once again recounted the origin of the red-colored crystal for Lisa and Nolan. "Oh? It seems to have some impurities. It's still too early to draw conclusions about what it is. We'll need further research, Lisa said, her fair arms crossed over her chest, her emerald-like eyes showing a keen interest. Yes, for Mondstadt's sake, I'll leave the analysis and research of these matters to you, Lisa. Jean closed her eyes and then slowly opened them, exhaling a warm breath. It seemed like her mind was a bit weary. Lisa looked at Jean with concern, but now was a time of crisis. Knowing Jean as she did, no matter how she persuaded her, she probably wouldn't allow herself to rest for a while. It was better to quickly analyze the composition of this red crystal, see if they could find the reason behind Storm Terror's irrational behavior, and help Jean alleviate some of the pressure. With that in mind, Lisa reached out to take the red crystal. Miss Lisa, please wait a moment. Nolan reached out to stop her, saying, I encountered this kind of red crystal when I went on an adventure the day before yesterday. Nolan recounted the experience of finding the crystal while searching for treasure with Fiscal, defeating the Eye of the Storm at the lookout point, and discovering it. He also mentioned being deceived by a green-clothed bard. Although that guy didn't explain the reason, he said that ordinary people would get hurt if they touched it. Miss Lisa, I think it's better for you not to touch it directly, Nolan said, providing this information without revealing his foreknowledge, as it had a reasonable source. Oh? Is that so? Then why can the traveler touch it? She's been carrying it for a long time. Paimon exclaimed in surprise. I don't know about that. Perhaps there's something special about Lumen. After all, she doesn't have a vision but can still use elemental powers. It's really hard to believe, Nolan shrugged, indicating his lack of understanding. Well, little adventurer makes a valid point. Let me try using elemental power on it and see how it reacts, Lisa agreed, acknowledging Nolan's words. She hadn't realized the danger when she saw the traveler touching it earlier. The purple lightning element approached the gloomy red crystal, emitting a sizzling sound. The lightning released by Lisa seemed to collide with some force within the crystal and then annihilated each other. This is... Jean frowned slightly. This doesn't seem like a normal reaction. Lumen's amber pupils also showed some surprise. She hadn't expected the red crystal to repel elemental powers. After all, she could use elemental powers herself and didn't feel anything when holding the red crystal. Regarding this, she herself didn't understand. It seems that the impure power within the crystal is repelling the elemental powers within us. If we had touched it just now, it would have been very painful. Thank you for your reminder, little adventurer, Lisa said with gratitude. Lisa placed her hands on her waist, covered by her skirt and robe, and gently pressed a few soft indentations with her fingertips, smiling with relief. Lisa has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 180 affection points. Current affection level, LV.5, 70/500. So, what should we do with this? Paimon scratched her pure white hair with her small hand and pointed to the red crystal. We'll have to continue letting the little cutie keep it. After all, you won't be affected, right? Lisa smiled at Lumen with relief on her fair face. Little cutie. Lumen hadn't expected to be called that. She nodded and then put away the red crystal. Whether it's your ability to freely use elemental powers without the need for a vision, or your immunity to the impure power within the crystal, traveler, your situation is truly incredible. Do you have any understanding of these things? Jean asked, feeling a bit emotional. Even Lisa, who had such profound research on elemental powers, couldn't guide elemental powers before obtaining a vision. The traveler's existence indeed broke common sense. After all, only non-human beings like slimes and whopper flowers could do this. Lumen shook her head lightly. Before losing her powers, she only had some understanding of elemental powers on the continent of Teyvat but hadn't mastered them, so she really didn't know what was going on. Perhaps it had something to do with her being from another world. I think so too. Jean nodded slightly, then looked at Nolan and the others. You two defeated Storm Terror and resolved the windstorm that enveloped Mondstadt. Such great achievements should be rewarded. Please accept the title of Honorary Knight of the Knights of Favonius. Honorary Knight. Paimon was surprised, and Lumen showed the same expression. Even Nolan was slightly surprised in his heart. But indeed, he had contributed a little in defeating Storm Terror and resolving the windstorm, so Jean wouldn't overlook his efforts. Yes, accepting this title means you are also members of the Knights of Favonius, and you'll receive the friendship of all Mondstadt. Jean placed her hands on her chest and spoke earnestly. Yes. Oh, and you might even get a discount when you buy things at the store in the future, Lisa continued with a soft smile as she covered her lips falsely. Wow, really? Paymon's eyes twinkled like little stars. Moreover, having the title of honorary knight didn't mean they had to stay in the Knights of Favonius. It wouldn't affect Lumen's travel plans. However, as honorary knights, they could enjoy some of the resources of the Knights of Favonius, just like other Knights of Favonius. For example, if Lumen wanted to find her brother, the Knights of Favonius would generally help for free. If an honorary knight needed a Favonius series weapon, as long as they brought the materials, the knights would probably help with the crafting. Unfortunately, there wouldn't be a salary, as honorary knights didn't have specific duties or jobs, it was just a title. But they would still have everything else a member of the knights should have and be respected by others. Of course, Nolan and Lumen naturally didn't refuse such a purely good thing. They smoothly obtained the title of honorary knight. After handling the aftermath of the windstorm, the Knights of Favonius would announce this news publicly. It was at this moment that Nolan's character panel suddenly displayed a concise message. Obtained title, Honorable Knight. A title. As expected, just as he had expected before, the title of honorary knight, a recognized status, indeed came with a title. I wonder what powerful effects it might have? Nolan glanced at the information of this title with a little anticipation. Honorable Knight, a respected title within the Knights of Favonius, making it easier to gain favor with the people of Mondstadt. Additionally, when adventuring with other Knights of Favonius, you will receive 30% more Adventure EXP for defeating enemies. Nolan was slightly surprised in his heart, he didn't expect the effect of this title to be so strong. First of all, it is easier to get along with the Mondstadt people to gain goodwill, in fact, it is similar to that Maiden Savior's specialty. However, the most surprising part was the latter effect, gaining 30% more Adventure EXP for defeating enemies when adventuring with other Knights of Favonius. If he had this title earlier at the Lion of the South Wind's Temple, in the end when Lisa defeated the two Abyss Mages, he wouldn't have been left with not even a drop of Adventure EXP. The matter with Storm Terror isn't over yet, and the reasons behind it are likely related to the peace and stability of Mondstadt. Please continue to help us and find out the truth, Jean said sincerely as the wind outside lifted her shawl, revealing her snow-white shoulders with gentle curves. She then adjusted the golden strands of hair that had been tousled by the wind. Don't worry, Grandmaster Jean, I'll do my best. Nolan replied with a smile. Us too. Paimon chimed in confidently, while Lumen nodded in agreement. Thank you. May the winds of Mondstadt guide you. Jean has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 180 affection points. Current affection level, LV.4, 30/400. Alright, if there's any new discovery, let's meet here again. You were busy all day yesterday and should rest now, especially you, Jean. You didn't sleep at all last night. Lisa first addressed Nolan and Lumen, then turned to Jean with a demanding tone. I understand, Lisa. I'll handle the aftermath of the windstorm and then rest. Jean had indeed spent the night without sleep, as the windstorm was still raging, and she had to deal with various crises. Sigh you, really? Nolan and Lumen left the Knights of Favonius headquarters. Paimon, flying in midair, suddenly realized something and said to Lumen. Traveler, since we arrived in Mondstadt, we've been busy with all sorts of things and haven't found a place to stay, right? That seems to be the case. But Mondstadt is so big, where should we go to find one? Lumen walked with one leg in front of the other, her legs wrapped in over the knee-white boots, revealing the snow-white skin of her thighs above the inward slanting boot tops. Hehe, there's someone here who should know their way around. Let's have him take us there. Paimon's gaze drifted to Nolan, and she smiled broadly. Chapter 122, An Unexpected Encounter. Want me to accompany you to find an inn? That's fine, I'm still quite familiar with Mondstadt City. Nolan nodded in agreement and did not reject their request. Well, thank you. Lumen's smile appeared as the sashes on her dress gently swayed. By the way, it seems like we only have a few tens of thousands of mora that we obtained from the treasure chests. It may not be enough for a few days. Should we sell those materials first? Paimon, with her left hand behind her back and her right hand rubbing her chin, asked Lumen. But where should we go? Lumen's soft lips parted slightly as she spoke in response to Paimon's words, but her gaze went to Nolan. She had a feeling that being an adventurer, he would know a little more about this than Paimon. If you want to get a better price, you might have to find buyers yourself. Although it seems a bit troublesome, I know an intelligence broker who should have connections. Alternatively, if you want it to be easier, you can directly sell them to the Adventurers Guild. The price shouldn't differ much. Nolan thought a little bit and spoke his suggestion. He, since that's the case then let's go over to the Adventurers Guild first and take a look. Paimon agreed, nodding her head. Alright, let's not trouble you to ask others for help. Lumen nodded her head, but her eyes accidentally glanced at the green-clothed teenager on the street below, the same one they had encountered in the forest when they encountered the storm terror and had a conversation with it. Nolan, didn't you mention encountering a bard dressed in green during your adventure 2 nights earlier? Is it the one on the street below? Lumen's legs, wrapped in white over-the-knee boots, stopped swinging as she looked down the street to the side. Hey? Slightly surprised, Nolan followed Lumen's line of sight downward, and indeed, in his line of sight, he saw Venti strolling leisurely. Hey? It's really him. We met him in the forest before, and he was with Storm Terror. Maybe he's one of the masterminds behind all this. Paimon had heard from Jean, the acting Grand Master, about the Abyss Order's involvement behind the windstorm, so she couldn't help but think of the suspicious character they had encountered earlier. At this moment, she felt a little excited, feeling like she had found a clue. Although I feel that he's not a bad person, it's also true that he's connected to the Storm Terror, Lumen said after a moment of contemplation, resting her fingers against her chin. Then let's go take a look. He still owes me a luxurious treasure chest. Nolan said with a nod of his head. The 3 of them immediately jumped down to the street below, but after taking a few steps to where Venti had been, they found that he had already disappeared. Damn it, what's up with that guy, why did he run off so fast? Paimon clenched her fists and stomped her foot in midair, her face showing a frustrated expression. She turned back to look at Lumen. Traveler, see if you can find any traces with elemental sight, she said. That's all that can be done. While Lumen couldn't use elemental energy without the vision, she had mastered a rare ability among vision holders, elemental sight. This ability allowed her to observe the world from the perspective of elemental energy, discovering things that were difficult to perceive with the naked eye. For example, there were a series of faint green footprints on the ground, attached with a slight wind elemental energy residue. At the same time, Nolan had activated his golden eye of judgment and discovered the elemental traces left by Venti. Although his eyes could see elemental traces like elemental sight, they didn't enter the perspective of elemental energy, which was a small difference. Let's go this way. Lumen followed the traces, leading everyone to a spot along the street where the footprints disappeared. It seems he went up from here, Nolan looked up and said, it looks like the Enmo Archon statue plaza above. Would it be possible to fly up like you, Paimon? In reality, climbing vertical walls without footholds in Teyvat wasn't as simple as it was in games. Even well-trained knights of Favonius would find it difficult, as without footholds, even the strongest strength couldn't be exerted. Of course, it was a different story if one could jump up in one leap. Although it took a bit of effort for the 2 of them, with their considerable strength, they could make it up. But there was no need to go to such great lengths to make a slight detour. Well, when I met him in the forest that day I did notice that he was carrying the vision, so he must be someone extraordinary. The white petals pinned on her head refracted a little shade in the sunlight covering her golden hair as Lumen nodded slightly in agreement. Nolan and Lumen quickly ran up, stepping onto the stone steps and arriving at the Enmo Archon Plaza. Sure enough. After searching around, they finally spotted Venti under the shadow of the corridor on the right side of the Enmo Archon statue plaza. Ah, it's you guys, what a coincidence. Venti noticed the approaching group and greeted them. Although they had only met once, whether it was the young adventurer or the traveler with what seemed like a humanoid Pokémon, he had left quite an impression. Hehe, it's not a coincidence at all, Paimon said, clasping her hands together and continuing with a smile, we came specifically to find you. Oh? What brings you to me, the most popular bard in Mondstadt? Venti asked with a smile. Mr. Venti, the great bard, do you not remember using an empty treasure chest to deceive me and my 2 companions out of our red crystal the day before yesterday? Nolan was a bit speechless to Venti who was playing dumb here. At the same time, he also attempted to gauge Venti's strength with his still open golden eyes, but unsurprisingly, like the wind dragon, it was also unknown. Level. Oh, I won't forget about that, please give me a little time to prepare the funds, Venti said playfully, patting his green hat and looking at Nolan. Nolan also casually said just, after all, if the Enmo Archon truly pretended to be ignorant, could he really beat him up? Well, actually, we came to find you for this matter. Since you took someone else's red crystal, you must know where it came from, right? Is it related to the storm terror? Lumen asked with a puzzled expression on her fair face. I see, so the suspicion falls on me, that's truly heartbreaking, Venti said dramatically, clutching his chest as if he were about to faint. Nolan, Lumen, and Paimon crossed their arms and stared at him, their attitude clearly indicating that if he had no problem, why did he take someone else's red crystal? All right, in order to clear the suspicion on me, the great bard, I'll tell you these are the tears that Dvalin shed due to his pain. Venti explained. Dvalin. Tears. A series of doubts popped up in Paimon's mind, while Lumen nodded as if he somewhat understood. That's the name of the storm dragon, isn't it? With such a name, it seems you're quite familiar with it. I also have one of its tear crystals. What's the use of collecting them? Lumen said, taking out the crystal, which was circulating with a gloomy light. Wait, why does it look clear and transparent now? Lumen looked at the crystal in her hand, completely devoid of its previous gloomy red color, her ember-like eyes widened in surprise. Chapter 123, Lumen's Request. A gentle breeze swept by, brushing the white hem of Lumen's dress against her soft calves. Beside her, Paimon widened her eyes in surprise. Hey? Has it been purified? It's unbelievable. Despite being the Inmo Archon, Venti found it difficult to effortlessly purify the residual power left by the shadow dragon, Durin. Otherwise, he would have resolved the issue long ago. Using the power of a god to forcefully purify it would instead cause even more damage to Dvalin. Could this be due to your special constitution? Nolan remarked, that although he already knew, he couldn't help but marvel at the situation. Maybe. Lumen replied, not entirely sure, but since this phenomenon had occurred, she might indeed possess the ability to purify these red-colored crystals. As expected of a traveler from a foreign land, possessing unimaginable abilities. Venti said with a smile of admiration, relieved that he didn't have to find a solution to purify the crystals himself. He took out another scarlet red crystal from his pocket and said, Traveler, I have another tear crystal here. See if you can purify it. That way, I can help Dvalin and solve the crisis facing Mondstadt. Really? You aren't lying to us, right? Paimon looked at him with suspicious eyes. Do I look like someone who would deceive others? Venti sighed with a hint of helplessness. But didn't you obtain this Dvalin tear from Nolan's hands? Lumen's hand rested on her waist, revealing a somewhat speechless expression. Misunderstanding, it's all just a misunderstanding. It was an exchange with a treasure chest, just that the payment hasn't been completed yet, Venti insisted, denying any deception. That being said. In fact, Lumen was also curious about whether she could truly purify the crystals. She took the red crystal from Venti and held it in her hand. Not long after, the gloomy energy within the scarlet crystal seemed to be expelled by an invisible force, dissipating like steam. It actually worked. Venti said with some surprise. Nothing was more convincing than seeing it with one's own eyes. All right, if you say you can solve Mondstadt's crisis, is there anything we can help with? Lumen returned the purified tear crystal to Venti, crossing her arms over her chest. Hey? If it's you guys, you can indeed help. After all, everyone saw you drive away the storm terror from Mondstadt. When the time comes, it'll be much easier for you to go to the Mondstadt Cathedral and borrow something. Venti rubbed his chin with his palm, pondered for a moment, then nodded. Borrow something? Paimon looked puzzled. Ahem, that's something essential if you want to get the storm terror back to normal, but now is not the time to go borrow something, I have to go get ready first, so excuse me for a moment. Venti coughed lightly, waved his hand, and turned to leave. Ah, are you just leaving like this? Where are you going? Paimon called after Venti's retreating figure. I'm going to the place that symbolizes the hero of Mondstadt. Farewell. Venti's voice drifted from his green-clad back. If Nolan remembered correctly, Lumen and Paimon had interrupted Venti earlier when he attempted to cleanse the curse from the wind dragon in the forest, inadvertently exposing themselves to the abyss's corrupting influence. This was not the power of the poisonous blood of the shadow dragon, Durin, but a magical curse cast by the abyss mage who wanted to control the wind dragon. Without this curse, the wind dragon probably wouldn't have gotten out of control so easily. The place Venti mentioned going should be the massive tree in Windrise. Not only was it a crucial node in Mondstadt's ley line circulation, but it also had the most abundant wind elemental power near Mondstadt city. As the Inmo Archon, Venti should have no problem standing under the shade of the tree, using its power to ease his injuries. In the game's plot, Lumen and Paimon would also chase after him, wanting to question Venti about the Inmo Archon aka himself. After all, her main purpose for coming to Mondstadt was to find the Inmo Archon to see if it was the unknown god that took her brother. And with Venti's familiarity with the Inmo Archon's attendant, the Storm Dragon, it's obvious that he also knows the Inmo Archon's story. After that, with Lumen's purification ability, even standing by her side could be effective. With the combined power of Lumen's purification and the tree, Venti's curse would soon be alleviated, and then they would figure out how to borrow things like the Holy Lyre to Himmel from the Mondstadt Cathedral. That was probably the process. Nolan tried hard to recall, feeling that he shouldn't be wrong. Sure enough, as Lumen watched Venti walk away, she pondered for a moment and said to Nolan, "I still have some things I want to clarify. About finding an inn and selling monster drops. Could you help me with that?" After speaking, she clasped her hands together in a pleading gesture. "That's no problem. After all, isn't it normal for fellow Knights of Favonius to help each other? Besides, although we haven't known each other for long, we're already friends, right?" Nolan smiled nonchalantly. He hadn't expected a day would come when Lumen would earnestly ask him for help. In the game's plot, after she became an adventurer, she was basically entrusted with various tasks by others. It was rare for her to ask for help from others. He, Nolan, you're so nice," Paimon said with a smile as he floated in midair with his hands behind his back. "Paimon has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 90 affection points. Current affection level, LV.2, 140/200. Well, let's meet at the Good Hunter's restaurant for lunch. I'll treat you to a feast." Lumen brushed aside her golden locks, revealing her fair ears and smiling. "Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 150 affection points. Current affection level, LV.3, 195/300. Seeing the consecutive affection notifications popping up in the character panel, Nolan once again patted his chest, indicating there was no problem. Lumen handed over some drop materials she had collected from defeating monsters on her way to Mondstadt to Nolan before leading Paimon to chase after Venti's direction. Not long after, Nolan first went to the Adventurers Guild and sold a bunch of miscellaneous items like slime condensate, dead ley lines leaves, and 1-star artifacts, earning a total of around 110,000 mora. Mainly, the 2 1-star artifacts and 1 2-star quality dead ley line leaves sold for more mora, while slime condensate, priced at 1,000 mora per clump, wasn't worth much. After all, slimes were one of the most common monsters in Teyvat, so their drop materials weren't rare. Thus, together with his previous savings and the 10,000 mora opened in yesterday's ordinary treasure chest, he now had a huge sum of 900,000 mora, which allowed him to do a lot of things. For example, he could pay 9 months' rent to Eula, or buy a cheaper 3-star weapon, and so on. The drop materials given by Lumen were pretty much the same thing, but it was a lot more than Nolan, and the Adventurers Guild paid 200,000 mora for it. With this money, life would be much more comfortable than when he first arrived, at least he wouldn't have to stay in the Knights of Favonius relief shelter. Leaving the Adventurers Guild, Nolan continued to help Lumen and Paimon find an inn. At noon, Nolan was sitting outside the Good Hunter restaurant, and the fountain in the square that had been smashed by the Wind Dragon already had a construction team busy with restoration work. The battle had also affected the Good Hunter restaurant, with its sign knocked over and stoves shattered. Fortunately, the damage wasn't severe, and after emergency repairs this morning, it was now open for business as usual. Chapter 124, Mondstadt Cathedral. Lumen's white dress had a diagonal hemline that extended from front to back, revealing her snowy thighs just above her knee-high boots. "Hehe, sorry to keep you waiting. Let's eat, let's eat." Paimon fluttered over, eagerly anticipating the meal. Paimon is really impatient. "We just ordered, and it'll take a while before the food arrives," Nolan chuckled. "Ah, we meet again, young and talented adventurer," Venti said casually, taking a seat opposite them at the small round table. "Every time I see Venti, it feels like a breath of fresh air. Could it be that this is why bards are so beloved by their audience?" Nolan joked lightly. As the Inmo Archon, Venti naturally possessed a friendly disposition that made him hard to dislike. "Exactly, but of course, the most important thing is my unparalleled musical talent here in Mondstadt. And our next plan is also related to that, which is to go to the cathedral and borrow. Wait. Nolan revealed a somewhat helpless expression, this is a restaurant. You wouldn't just blurt out your plans so loudly, would you? After all, it concerned Mondstadt's peace, and he remembered in the game's plot how the traveler had almost obtained the holy lyre to Himmel at the Mondstadt Cathedral but was intercepted by the Fatui. He couldn't believe it was just a coincidence. They were probably being watched. Subsequently, there were quite a few complications in retrieving the holy lyre to Himmel. Although Nolan couldn't directly state it, he remained cautious. He didn't want any mishaps in something as important as Mondstadt's safety. It would be best if everything went smoothly. Haha, you're right. Venti realized and chuckled as he adjusted his hat. God, having human-like traits also meant having human-like flaws, such as occasional carelessness. To prevent her dress from affecting her comfort while sitting, Lumen pressed it against her legs' contoured lines, then sat on a wooden chair with a backrest nearby. Let's wait until after the meal to discuss this matter, she said, the small white flower on her head reflecting a faint glow in the midday sun. Nolan nodded slightly, then handed Lumen a small cloth bag containing 20 Mora notes of 10,000 each and said, "This is all of the Mora I exchanged for after selling all of your materials to the Adventurers Guild." Thank you." Lumen's fair face lit up with a smile. As her friend with the highest affection aside from Paimon and Amber, she trusted Nolan very much. As for the inn, since I live in Valberry Street, I'm more familiar with that side, so I found a inn with good conditions and reasonable rent. It's 8,000 Mora per day, and you can move in after paying. Nolan continued. 8,000 Mora. Why does it still feel expensive? Paimon exclaimed in surprise. Before selling the drop materials from monsters, the tens of thousands of Mora they had wouldn't even be enough for a week's stay. After all, it's an inn. If you plan to stay for a long time, renting a house would be more cost-effective. Nolan explained. Let's forget about it, Lumen shook her head. Mainly because rental houses generally couldn't be rented for short stays, it usually took several months or even half a year. She needed to find her brother and couldn't stay in one place for that long. As the waitress, Sarah, brought the delicious-looking food, the topic of the inn was temporarily set aside. Finally, after being in Mondstadt for so long, we're having a good meal. Hee, so full. Paimon floated in the air, rubbing her little belly, looking a bit unsteady. Maybe she ate too much and her body's overloaded. Nolan chuckled inwardly. Oh my, Paimon, you're full, but I feel sorry for the traveler's wallet. This meal cost 20,000 Mora, Venti teased, folding his hands behind his head. What the hell? Did you not eat anything? Paimon glared at him indignantly. Ignoring the two childish figures, Lumen descended the final steps, her legs enveloped in knee-high white boots. She paused, swinging her legs slightly, looking somewhat surprised at the solemn spire building in front of her. The Mondstadt Cathedral truly lives up to its reputation. It's my first time here. Nolan remarked with a hint of nostalgia. Just now on the road, Lumen had already told him a bit about Venti's plan. Are you saying the holy lyre to Himmel, which can awaken Dvalin's true nature, is inside? As Mondstadt's treasure, the harp played by the Inmo Archon Barbatos, is it really so easy for the Church of Favonius to lend it to us? Paimon, having heard Venti's story about the lyre before, had these two questions. Well, borrowing something doesn't necessarily require asking its owner's consent. As long as it's returned intact in the end, isn't that enough? Venti smirked, uttering words that drew disdain from everyone. As for now, the only person present who knew his true identity, Nolan felt that Venti was speaking so confidently because he was the original owner of the holy lyre to Himmel. Wow, you're just a thief, and yet you say it so grandly. Even Paimon was shocked by Venti's words. Is there no other way? The breeze swept Lumen's golden hair aside, exposing her fair earlobes to the sunlight, which refracted a dazzling ray of light. It depends on whether your status as Mondstadt heroes who repelled storm terror holds any weight. If everything goes smoothly, we won't need to resort to such, methods? Venti said, recalling a saying from Liu, but it seemed like he was insulting himself. He hesitated momentarily, wanting to change to a more euphemistic phrase. Watching him stumble for a moment, Nolan smiled and helped him out, resorting to high-handed methods, right? Yes, that's it. Venti said without feeling embarrassed. Lumen and Paimon simultaneously gave him a scornful look. In terms of being thick-skinned, I hereby declare you the champion, surpassing even the Geo Archon's shield, Nolan thought to himself, speechless. Let's go. It's said to be safely kept deep inside the cathedral. Let's first test the waters, Venti said, taking the lead into the cathedral. Nolan and the others followed, somewhat resigned. To save Dvalin, the holy lyre to Himmel was essential, and now they could only accompany Venti and see how it went. Since it was just past noon, there weren't many people at the Mondstadt Cathedral. Venti approached a nun ahead and greeted her, "Hello, sister." The young woman in a white nun's robe turned around, somewhat surprised, and looked at them. "May the wind god bless you, young poet, and the two heroes who repelled storm terror. May I ask what I can do to help you?" Chapter 125, The Plan to Steal the Holy Lyre to Himmel. Mondstadt City, Favonius Cathedral. Venti smiled and said to the nun, "Sister Gotland, you should know these two heroes who repelled storm terror, right? They now have a method to prevent storm terror from attacking Mondstadt, and it involves using the Holy Lyre to Himmel. It's impossible. Please leave." Sister Gotland outright rejected the poet's still unfinished request before continuing. As a treasure once used by Lord Barbados himself, lending it out requires a document signed by the acting Grand Master, the Cardinal, and representatives of the people. Do you have that with you? Venti certainly didn't have those things. All he could do was try to soften the nun's heart with his smile. "Big sis." Seeing Venti's pleading expression, Gotland's tone softened slightly, but she still refused, saying, "This is a rule that everyone must abide by. It's just not possible." Even the two Mondstadt heroes are not trusted. Venti didn't give up. This time, he brought up Nolan and Lumen, saying, "Without the Holy Lyre to Himmel, Mondstadt will still be attacked by storm terror. What should we do then? Of course, I never doubted your intentions. The attack by storm terror last time caught the knights off guard. As long as the acting Grand Master is prepared, it won't be able to leave Mondstadt at all. So forget about the Holy Lyre to Himmel," the young woman in nun's attire said, holding her arms and shaking her head. As expected, no agreement was reached. Nolan watched the situation unfold in front of him, similar to the game's plot, and it wasn't surprising. After all, borrowing such a precious item as the Holy Lyre to Himmel required the consent of several authorities. His appearance wouldn't change much, and he hadn't done anything. Alas, if that's the case, there's no other way. Venti sighed, then straightened his posture, lifted his chin, and put on a relaxed expression. "It seems I can't hide it anymore. Actually, I am Barbados. There shouldn't be any problem with the Inmo Archon using his own belongings, right?" Venti thought he would receive adoring gazes from the faithful when he revealed his identity, but the turn of events was unexpected. Little poet, if there's nothing else, I'll go now." The nun glanced at him expressionlessly and walked away. Nolan watched, speechless. "Even though you're really Barbados, what's the use of saying it? Who would believe it? You need to use your divine power to make people believe." "She's gone," Paimon shrugged in mid-air. "In fact, our goal has been achieved." "At least she didn't deny that the Holy Lyre to Himmel is really here," Venti said helplessly, lowering his hands. It was pitiful. He didn't expect that after so many years, the devout believers would turn away from him, the Inmo Archon. "Just now you said that you are Barbados." Lumen's amber eyes stared at him, asking. The sunlight, shining through the stained glass windows of the cathedral, gently touched her chest, illuminating the shadow between her dress and her fair skin. She had always found it a little odd that a bard knew so much about the Inmo Archon and the hidden secrets between his attendant, and if he was Barbados, the Inmo Archon, it would make sense. "Now that I look closely, Venti, you do resemble the statue of the Inmo Archon in the square," Nolan also exclaimed in surprise, staring at him. After all, he couldn't show an expression of "I already knew, it's no big deal." "No wonder you're so concerned about Dvalin's matters." Paimon rubbed her chin thoughtfully. "Hee." Venti blinked playfully with one eye and smiled. "If anyone knew I was the Inmo Archon, it would be enough to walk down the street and deal with the curious citizens. It wouldn't be as easy as it is now." "Seems a bit reasonable." Nolan nodded and said. "Hee, right." Venti, dressed in green, pondered for a moment and looked at Lumen. "I understand what you want to talk to me about. Let's wait until we've dealt with Mondstadt's crisis before we have a proper chat." Sounds good." Lumen had previously expressed her desire to meet the Inmo Archon when she had asked about him in the large tree near the Windrise Mountain. That's great. I didn't expect to find the Inmo Archon so easily. Paimon exclaimed happily, flipping in mid-air. Her golden crown almost fell off her head, but she caught it with her hand and placed it back, saying, "So, next, we need to get the Holy Lyre to Himmel." But even the face of the Inmo Archon, Barbatos, didn't work. What should we do next? I anticipated this beforehand, so the official methods won't work. We'll have to resort to trickery. Venti led the group out of the Favonius Cathedral and explained as they walked. I don't want to steal. Lumen naturally understood what Venti meant by trickery. Yet, if we get caught, we'll definitely be punished by the knights. We just became honorary knights, and now we'll be branded as thieves. I refuse. Paimon said firmly. Venti tried to persuade them, then sighed slightly and said, "Don't think like that. With your skills, how could you fail? And even if you do, with your contributions to Mondstadt, as long as you explain properly, you should be able to get away with it. If it were me, I wouldn't even be able to explain. You're the Inmo Archon, aren't you? Isn't it easy for you to take something?" Nolan asked with a puzzled expression. "Don't think of Archons as so powerful. What if we're still caught? Then I, as a Archon, will have no face left. I'm just the most truly weak of the 7 Archons." Venti spread his hands, his face still smiling, not feeling any frustration or anything like that when he said he was weak. This level of audacity. He actually said he wanted face, no shame. Don't we want face? Besides, who believes that you are the weakest one, really? Nolan pondered for a moment, carefully choosing his words, and said, "Actually, regarding the trickery to obtain the Holy Lyre to Himmel, I have my own thoughts." Oh. Lumen, Paimon, and Venti all looked at him with puzzled expressions. Earlier, wasn't the Grand Master Jean being embarrassed by those envoys from the Snezhnia, who also seemed to have some kind of agenda against the Storm Dragon? So I was thinking, what if we could pin the theft of the Holy Lyre to Himmel on them? If the plan succeeds, the knights will regain their dominance in diplomacy. With the Fatui causing trouble in Mondstadt and the Abyss Order coveting Storm Terror, the situation would improve significantly in an instant. Nolan spoke out his thoughts. After all, stealing the Holy Lyre to Himmel, whether or not they were caught red-handed, that the harp was missing would still be discovered. And the fact that they had approached that nun to ask about borrowing the harp would easily be taken as the first object of suspicion. After all, they did have the capability to pull off such a scheme. Rather than making themselves suspicious, it was better to expose the enemy in plain sight. The trouble caused by the Fatui in the game's plot was not insignificant. So, making them scapegoats wouldn't be a problem at all. Chapter 126, Negative Affection, 2 in 1 chapter. Not far from the Mondstadt Cathedral, the colossal statue of the Inmo Archon stood prominently in the square. As Nolan and the others paused to discuss the plan, a gentle breeze swept through. Lumen's white dress revealed her snow-white back, and the ribbons attached to it fluttered provocatively, occasionally brushing against nearby young adventurers. Observing Lumen lost in thought, completely unaware of their presence, Nolan's lips twitched slightly as he caught the mischievous ribbons. Not a bad plan, young adventurer. It can get us the lyre and clear our relationship while helping the knights. But how do we disguise ourselves as the Fatui? Venti mused, looking down at the ground and stroking his chin. That's right, Paimon was wondering about that too, Paimon said as his starry eyes looked at Nolan and nodded his head. Under the diagonally cut hem of her skirt, her legs wrapped in knee-high boots were revealed, and the golden pattern on them looked like it possessed a radiant glow as Lumen lifted her head, took the ribbons from Nolan, and said, "I have a strong dislike for the Fatui. If you can thwart their plots, then, by all means, do as you please, I will cooperate fully. Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 120 affection points. Current affection level, LV.4, 15/400. The first encounter Lumen had with the Fatui was when a female diplomat from their envoy had aggressively confronted acting Grand Master Jean to embarrass her, and wanting to take over the defense of Mondstadt City and even killed Valen. This left Lumen with no positive feelings towards the Fatui. No need to be so serious. After all, as honorary knights, helping the knights is our duty. Nolan looked at the affection prompt that popped up on the character panel and smiled before continuing to explain. In fact, it's very simple to do this. I defeated a Fatui debt agent a long time ago and interrogated him and learned about their stealth assassination technique. As long as I sneak in and take the holy lyre to Himmel while making the guards believe someone invisible is taking it, they'll naturally suspect the Fatui first. The theft of Mondstadt's greatest treasure will provide ample reason for the knights to demand an explanation from them. Stealth techniques like this aren't common. If they don't suspect the Fatui, who else would they suspect? After all, the knights' trouble stemmed from their failure to handle the storm, giving the Fatui an excuse to make various unreasonable demands. Because even though they knew that the Fatui had problems, as an explicitly diplomatic mission, the knights were obligated to take responsibility for their safety. That makes sense. At least until we retrieve the holy lyre to Himmel, the knights will keep a close eye on them and won't be able to meddle in how Mondstadt deals with storm terror. Paimon, sometimes quite clever, quickly understood the reasoning after a moment's thought. But then, we won't be able to act together with you, Lumen. Her fair cheeks turned towards him, her amber eyes showing a hint of concern, as she said. Mondstadt Cathedral, as the place where the holy lyre to Himmel was kept, would surely have strong and numerous guards. If they were caught while invisible, they would have to rely on Grand Master Jean to bail them out. That would be too embarrassing. So, when I move, just provide support nearby. If things look bad, hurry up and rescue me. Nolan was not arrogant, and Lumen's reasoning made sense. Now that the plan is clear, let's set the action time for the afternoon. Around 6 in the afternoon, most of the guards will be off duty, making it safer to act, Venti said with a smile, nodding. All right. Nolan of course had no objections. In the game's plot, Lumen always acted when most guards were off duty. But because of the appearance of the Fatui, who had ideas about the holy lyre to Himmel, she was discovered by the guards who were left behind. In the end, not only did she fail to obtain the holy lyre to Himmel, but she also ended up being wanted, while the Fatui member involved walked away scot-free. So, during the operation, they must be vigilant in case that a member from the Fatui appears. Surely, the one sent to steal the holy lyre to Himmel won't be weak. If she manages to take it away, it would be a disgrace to me as a transmigrator who is supposed to have foresight. There was still some time before the operation. Nolan accompanied Lumen and the others to take a look at the inn, but the price of 8,000 mora per day was still a bit expensive. She still needed to keep some savings for travel expenses on her journey to find her brother. After searching for a while longer without finding anything satisfactory, Paimon floated in the air with her hands hanging down, looking exhausted as she sighed. Could it be that those innkeepers deliberately raised the prices because they see us as outsiders, trying to rip us off? Oh, when it comes to the prices of Mondstadt inns, this wandering bard here knows a thing or two. 8,000 is already considered cheap. After all, Mondstadt City is the most prosperous city in Mondstadt, with many traveling merchants. If it weren't for the storm, the inn prices might have been even higher, Venti explained based on his observations and experiences. So that's how it is. Paimon looked pitifully at the golden-haired girl with white flowers on her head. Traveler, you must make more money. I don't want to sleep on the streets. Lumen, with her hands pressed against her soft waist covered by white long sleeves, looked at her with a helpless expression and said, why should I be the only one making money? Why don't you go? Hehe, that's because I'm currently working as your tour guide. Your payment is responsible for supporting me. Paimon replied with a slight smile on her snow-white face. How about in a few days, I take you to the Adventurers Guild to register as adventurers? With your strength, completing some difficult commissions shouldn't be a problem, and those commissions pay handsomely. Nolan suggested. Well, it seems we have no choice. Otherwise, the little Mora in her hand would be gone in just a few days, Lumen thought silently to herself. By the way, didn't you say you live near the Valberry Street? Is your house big? Can we bother you for a few days, hehe. Paimon's gaze shifted to Nolan. Oh? Me? It's not impossible, Nolan pondered a moment. He rented a small independent courtyard of Eula's house. Besides the living room, kitchen, and bathroom on the first floor, there were 3 rooms on the second floor. He lived in one, and used one as a study, leaving one vacant. Considering that he was also a tenant, renting out the vacant room would seem a bit opportunistic. But simply letting friends stay for free wouldn't be too much trouble. Moreover, being close to Lumen would surely make it easier to gain affection, so this was a good thing. Never mind, I won't trouble you. I can't afford even a few days at an inn. Lumen clasped her hands together and held them against her upper abdomen, lifting her chest wrapped in the dress slightly. She pondered for a moment, feeling that even though they were friends, she shouldn't trouble them too much. What if conflicts arose? Yet, if possible, it's more convenient to rent a place by yourself. Nolan nodded indifferently. Affection was something that depended on personal emotional changes. Rushing it would only lead to dislike. In the end, Lumen and Paimon chose the inn that initially cost 8,000 mora. After comparing, they felt it offered the best value for money. Mondstadt Cathedral. With Lumen and Paimon's accommodation settled, time slowly passed until it was finally 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Nolan sneaked inside the cathedral alone, avoiding the crowds. His sneak assassination technique had a level 4, using it once could maintain optical invisibility for 10 minutes. But this time was barely enough for him to sneak in and retrieve the Holy Lyre to Himmel. There was a high chance he would be exposed when leaving. So, he needed to rest and recover his spirit and stamina consumed by stealth. And with his abundant life specialty, it wouldn't take too long for him to recover. Move forward a bit and go down through the semicircular stone door in front. Venti's voice blended with the light breeze, echoing in Nolan's ears. Although Nolan had seen the game's plot, he only vaguely remembered the specific location of the Holy Lyre to Himmel after entering the stone door. Therefore, he still needed Venti's guidance to quickly and accurately find it, which was quite simple for the Enmo Archon. In a state of stealth, Nolan easily evaded the nun's scrutiny and slipped into the semicircular stone door in the middle of the cathedral, then descended the winding stone steps. At this moment, a knight of Favonius approached. Nolan paused, holding his breath against the wall. Out of curiosity, he activated his golden eye of judgment to take a look at the knight. Level 17. This level of strength should be average among Mondstadt knights. After the sound of footsteps slowly faded away, he continued down the stairs and arrived at a spacious platform located at the highest point of the entire basement. There were steps on both sides leading further down. Look forward from here. The room at the far end is where the Holy Lyre to Himmel is stored. Venti's voice echoed in Nolan's ear again, reminding him that the Holy Lyre to Himmel seemed to be kept there. With limited time in stealth, although most of the guards had finished work, there were still some on duty before the shift change. So, he had to act quickly. Go down the stairs on the left, then walk along the wall. There was a patrolling knight just now, creating a short gap in time. Go quickly. Nolan heard Venti's instructions and didn't hesitate. At the fastest speed that wouldn't produce any footsteps, he ran down. There were many cabinets storing documents and items in the basement. Without stealth, he might need to use them to evade the guards' eyes and ears, but it wasn't necessary now. He walked boldly down the middle of the path, making no sound. The guards completely ignored him. In less than 2 minutes, Nolan arrived at the large room dedicated to the Holy Lyre to Himmel, much faster than he had expected. As long as he quickly grabbed the Holy Lyre, he would have enough time to escape without needing to use stealth a second time. Hurry up and get the lyre. Venti's urging voice sounded. Others are rushing here. They're coming fast. Hearing Venti's words, Nolan, who hadn't stopped his feet, immediately exerted force, his ears suddenly losing all the various sounds they had been able to pick up. The next moment, he moved at an extremely fast speed, his body appearing in front of the Holy Lyre to Himmel as if teleporting. He grabbed it in his hand, and then the various sounds in the basement slowly reached him. The most intense of these was the sound of air being sliced apart coming from behind. Nolan didn't have time to dodge. He turned around, intending to block with his hand, but immediately realized he was still holding the Holy Lyre to Himmel. His hand paused for a moment, and then a purple leg kicked him in the abdomen. The powerful impact sent him flying like a rocket, bang crashing into the wall, even breaking his stealth state. Fortunately, during the flight, Nolan had stored the Holy Lyre to Himmel in the dark red delusion hanging on his neck, and didn't bump into it, so it wasn't damaged by the impact. Cough, cough. He coughed lightly, spitting out some saliva. Thanks to his strong physique, even with such a blow, he only suffered superficial injuries, which wasn't a big problem for the time being. Had a stealth skill and a special delusion. It seems that Inspector General Heston left you quite a bit of information recently. You and that rose which suddenly wiped out one of our bases in Mondstadt. It really troubled Our Lady a bit. I was standing next to her at the time, feeling like my hair was going to be signed off. A voice came, and what appeared in Nolan's sight was a woman wearing a tight purple jumpsuit, with a purple cloak hood draped over it. Her eyes were covered with an eye patch, the corners of her mouth were raised in a smile, and a purple delusion was pinned to her chest. Electro Chechen Mage has negative feelings towards you, obtained -300 affection points, current affection level LV.1, 300/100. Sure enough, she appeared the Fatui Electro Chechen mage who stole the traveler's holy lyre to Himmel in the game plot. Possibly because she was a female, Nolan his innate talent seemed to take effect on her as well. Since Nolan didn't know her name, the character panel simply showed Electro Chechen Mage, which was the game's surrogate for this type of dressed Fatui members of Fatui Chechen Mages group. Unfortunately, she was an enemy, so negative feelings arose. This was the first time he had received negative affection points. Fortunately, she was an enemy. Otherwise, he didn't know how long it would take to return to positive numbers. Hand over that lyre, I don't want to delay any longer because of your resistance. The Electro Chechen mage didn't want to stay here any longer. If she was discovered by the Mondstadt Knights and blocked at the exit, she wouldn't be able to escape either. Silently, Nolan glanced at her with his golden eye of judgments, and all of a sudden the Chechen mage's strength and weaknesses were marked out from her body. Level 46. There were no other hidden injuries or various defects. The weaknesses of humans were the head and the heart. There was nothing more to say. Sorry, if you want the holy lyre to Himmel, you'll have to try and snatch it. Nolan stood up, took out the dull blade from the improved version of the delusion, and smiled. To be honest, with such a disparity in strength, Nolan could only barely delay. It would be difficult to win, but as long as he could stall, there wouldn't be a problem. When he could use stealth again, he would just disappear. After all, if the Electro Chechen mage hadn't used a surprise attack just now, she might not have been able to hit him while he was stealthily and seriously hidden. Chapter 127, Chasing the Electro Chechen Mage. Mondstadt Cathedral, underground basement. Wearing a purple hooded cloak, the Electro Chechen Mage remained silent, inwardly frustrated by the audacity of the person before her. In a flash of lightning, she suddenly appeared in front of Nolan, her legs clad in tight leather pants sweeping towards his neck. The Electro Chechen Mage was confident in her skills. Perhaps she refrained from using more conspicuous electro spells to avoid attracting the attention of the Knights of Favonius. The room was spacious. Most of the Knights of Favonius acting as guards had already finished their shifts. With only 2 or 3 remaining, it was normal for them not to notice this place. This suited Nolan's intentions. His stealth skill hadn't fully recovered yet and probably needed another 2 minutes. If spotted by the Knights of Favonius, he might end up on the wanted list. Feeling the pressure from the side, Nolan grabbed her ankle, trying to fling her against the wall. If it weren't for the unexpectedly fast speed of the Electro Chechen mage just now, and Nolan needing to secure the holy lyre to Himmel first, he could have countered her kick without any issues. Even if that kick of hers was suspected of being a sneak attack, it should have been fine if he could turn around and block it with his reaction speed. The Electro Chechen mage's body was agile. Utilizing her waist to exert force while airborne, she flipped her body, landing both feet on the wall to cushion the impact and simultaneously gathering momentum in her legs. Wrapping her hands in lightning element, she kicked off the wall, propelling herself lightly towards Nolan's head. Facing the elemental attack, Nolan dared not confront them head-on this time. Suddenly, his dull blade emitted a burst of crimson light. Rich fire element surged out from the delusion, attaching itself to the sword. After a brief assessment, he noticed that about 10% of the elemental power stored in the delusion had been depleted. Ignoring the Electro Chechen mage's attack, he aimed directly for her throat with the sword imbued with fire element. This move of attacking while defending was reasonable, after all, the dull blade was much longer than her arm. If she continued to attack recklessly, she would likely be the first to die. Clearly, the Electro Chechen mage wouldn't engage in such a losing situation. She condensed a ball of lightning in her palm and quickly pressed it against the burning sword tip. Zzz. Sizzle. The collision of fire and lightning instantly triggered an overload reaction, pushing the two apart. Who goes there? Someone intruded. Quickly inform the acting Grand Master. Such a big commotion immediately attracted the attention of the Knights of Favonius, and their armor clashed with a clacking sound and quickly gathered over here. At this moment, Nolan's stealth skill had just recovered. Without hesitation, he immediately vanished in front of the Electro Chechen mage. The Electro Chechen mage could sense that the damned adventurer was still standing in the original spot, but now, there was no chance to continue snatching the holy lyre to Himmel. The commotion from their fight had already attracted the guards' attention. If they didn't leave now, it would be game over once the acting Grand Master blocked the exit. It's the Fatui member, capture her. Two knights of Favonius rushed in, cautiously approaching the electro-Chechen mage with swords in hand. They could certainly discern the strength of someone who could stealthily infiltrate this place. They needed to delay her as much as possible and wait for more reinforcements to arrive. Humph! The electro-Chechen mage reluctantly conjured a lightning orb in her hand and fired it towards Nolan's original position. Then, utilizing the power of lightning element, she flashed outside the room, quickly darting away. The two knights of Favonius watched as the figure before them disappeared, momentarily stunned. Dodging the electro-Chechen mage's lightning orb, Nolan's footsteps immediately alerted the two knights. They seemed to have noticed the presence of someone capable of stealth here, thinking it must be the ally of the person from earlier. After all, debt agents among the Fatui people were adept at stealth techniques. Before the knights of Favonius could close in, Nolan began running out. At the same time, he whispered softly, "Venti, can you hear me?" "Ah, I can hear you. I saw your excellent performance just now." Venti's voice came through. "In that case, notify Lumen to block the electro-Chechen mage from escaping. She mentioned something about a lady of the Fatui people being in Mondstadt. There might be some conspiracy, so it's best to capture her and find out," Nolan said as he ran up the stairs leading out of the basement. With knowledge of the game's storyline, he remembered that Venti was the one who ultimately saved the Storm Dragon, Valen, and returned to Mondstadt. Everyone relaxed their guard at that moment, only to have the fair lady of the Fatui Harbingers take the Inmo Archon's Gnosis. The Gnosis was a higher-level elemental control center than the Visions, capable of merging with the body. It was the symbol of the 7 Archons of Teyvat, and only by possessing them could one gain divine power to fulfill the duties of governing a nation. However, the Tsaritsa of Snezhnia seems to have some kind of scheme. She actually ordered her subordinates, the Fatui Harbingers, to collect all the Gnosis. Knowing that such a thing would happen, although Nolan couldn't explicitly say it, it was still necessary to give a subtle reminder. Even though he was a bit puzzled when watching the plot earlier as to why Venti didn't resist, after all, the 7 Archons of Teyvat didn't become gods because they obtained the Gnosis, they were already immensely powerful Archons. Whether or not they had the Gnosis wouldn't have much impact on their strength. So even if Venti, no matter how much he says he is weak, it's not that bad that he can't resist the lady at all. I don't know what considerations he has. Well, my wind has sensed that she left the church, to the left of the cathedral. Wait, she jumped down to the cider lake. I and the traveler will go after her first. You hurry and catch up." Venti's words were a bit rushed, causing even the breeze brushing past his ears to hasten. The entire city of Mondstadt was actually built on a large island in the cider lake, with the Favonius Cathedral at the narrow tail end, also the highest point. Therefore, there were cliffs on both sides of the cathedral, with the cider lake below. To quickly leave Mondstadt city, using the wind gliders to glide directly over the cider lake was a good choice. Nolan ran out of the basement, turned left as soon as he exited the cathedral's gate, and soon arrived at the edge of the cliff. He saw several figures gliding in the sky outside, using wind gliders. Among them, the purple electro-Chechen mage was in the front, followed by Lumen and Paimon, with Venti at the rear. Feeling the airflow rushing past his body, Nolan took a leap and flew off the cliff. When his body began to descend, the wind glider on his back unfolded with a whoosh and glided on the wind. This was the advantage of being able to store items using elemental power. Equipping the wind glider was no longer so troublesome, he could just summon them directly on his back. "Ooh, she seems to want to fly to the island in front of us, let me give you a boost." Venti smiled and said, then summoned a gentle breeze to push Nolan from behind. Soon, he caught up with Lumen and also approached the electro-Chechen mage. Chapter 128, Listening to the Song. High in the sky, several figures unfolded their wind glider and soared on the wind. Lumen's legs, clad in knee-length white boots, dangled one in front of the other, with the hem of her skirt slightly lifted by the airflow, revealing her snow-white thighs and lantern shorts. Through her outstretched arms maintaining balance, one could catch a glimpse of the slightly shaded fair skin of her armpits. Lumen's amber eyes were fixed on the electro-Chechen mage just over 10 meters ahead, and her soft lips parted slightly as she said to the young adventurer beside her. "I'll fly up and flank her from the side. You try to distract her attention." "Okay, no problem." Nolan's delusion still had 90% of its elemental power, probably enough to conjure 9 fireballs or imbue the dull blade with fire elemental energy 9 times. The best option now, of course, was to launch fireball attacks. "All right." Lumen nodded her golden-haired head, her hands gathering wind elements and propelling them backward like a whirl, significantly increasing her flight speed. Nolan also gathered fire elements in his palms, forming a small fireball and aiming it at the wind glider on the Electro-Chechen mage's back. Without the enhancement of weapons, directly using elemental power for attacks would be slightly weaker. If the attack could hit, the damage to the relatively powerful Electro-Chechen mage might be limited. The best way was to burn her wind glider, causing her to fall into the lake. That way, even if she used her electro-elements, she would probably be electrocuted, as even she would be shocked by the water. The Electro-Chechen mage sensed the approaching firelight behind her and gritted her teeth, cursing inwardly. If not for the concerns about the Knights of Favonius, I would have electrocuted you into a scone first. With that said, she quickly dodged the fireball. But at that moment, a white figure entered her field of vision. Taking advantage of the Electro-Chechen mage's diverted attention towards Nolan, Lumen circled around and approached her from the side. Then, lifting her right foot clad in high-heeled boots, she kicked directly at the Electro-Chechen mage's exposed flank. This time, the Electro-Chechen mage couldn't evade. With the immense force of Lumen's high-heeled boot hitting her abdomen, she instantly felt intense pain, her body folding as she was propelled backward towards the cider lake. Lumen was about to retract her foot when suddenly a hand wearing purple gloves grabbed her ankle and attempted to pull her down. The Electro-Chechen mage, with her mouth revealed beneath the mask, coughed lightly and said, "You annoying little brat, it's not so easy to defeat me. You." Lumen's right foot twitched for a moment, but she found herself tightly grasped by the Electro-Chechen mage. With the wind glider barely able to bear the weight of two people, their descent hastened. "Ah, traveler!" Paimon behind them showed a panicked expression, eager to help. Seeing this, Nolan quickly intercepted her and said, "Hey, Paimon, going up there will only put yourself in danger. Let me handle it." As he spoke, he began to release fire elements from his delusion, forming small fireballs in his hands. This time, the Electro-Chechen mage was hanging onto Lumen's foot, and without the convenience of wind glider, she probably couldn't escape. Nolan smirked with a hint of a smile. "Don't move. If you dare to attack me, don't blame me for unleashing my electro-element. We'll both end up injured with this yellow-haired girl." The Electro-Chechen mage threatened Nolan. "Oh my, this is getting a little troublesome." Venti flew over and chuckled as he looked at the situation. "Hey, you actually have the heart to laugh." Paimon glared at him, stomping her foot. "Don't worry, let me play a tune to soothe everyone's body and mind." Venti casually touched the vision, and it transformed into a wooden lyre called Der Frühling in his hand. Venti's vision, which was used for show, was actually had the ability to transform into a wooden lyre with Sicilius and blue strings imbued with the power of Anmo. With this, as a bard, he could perform anytime, anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, please listen attentively to this piece, Afternoon Leisure Breeze. Venti gently closed his eyes, using the sky as his stage, his fingers slowly plucking the strings of the lyre. What the hell? The Electro-Chechen mage felt a sudden inexplicable tranquility. Just as she was about to angrily issue another threat, a calm melody rang out. Her fluctuating emotions were slowly smoothed out. "Why am I still working at this hour? I don't want to hear ladies scolding anymore. Ah, I'm so tired, I just want to go back and rest." The Electro-Chechen mage's head drooped little by little, her eyelids heavy as if all the exhaustion accumulated over time had erupted at once, making her incredibly drowsy. Besides wanting to return to her bed for sleep, it seemed she didn't want to do anything else. Even unconsciously, she loosened her grip on Lumen's hand, and she was about to fall into the lake. Nolan looked at the situation with slight surprise. Had Barbados, this guy who had been skipping work and slacking off for so many years, spent all his time studying the bard's skills? Merely with a melody, he could make the powerful Electro-Chechen mage fall asleep. If one could achieve this, it must be the most proud skill of most bards. Oops, Nolan, hurry up and catch her. If she falls into the lake, she might wake up again. Venti wiped his forehead and smiled. Nolan heard Venti's words, his heart skipping a beat, quickly gliding over to catch the Electro-Chechen mage around her waist. Watching her breathing gently with no signs of waking up, he breathed a sigh of relief. After all, catching her again wouldn't be easy. Then, a sudden thought crossed his mind. After clarifying the Fatui's information later, should he knock her out again? After all, with her strength, she could provide quite a few Adventure EXP. Hey, traveler, what's wrong with you?" Nolan suddenly heard Paimon's panicked voice and quickly turned his gaze, only to find Lumen also hanging limp in the air. The wind glider on her back were slowly descending, resembling a parachute. Hehe, little Paimon, don't worry. She just fell asleep. She wasn't near me earlier and naturally fell asleep when she heard the music, Venti explained. Phew, I see. You scared me for a moment. Paimon breathed a sigh of relief, patting her chest. Nolan, catch the traveler, and I'll blow you both to the shore. Then we can wake her up with water. Venti controlled a gentle breeze, blowing Lumen towards Nolan. With no other choice, Nolan reached out his other hand to catch her. Although she was a light girl, the weight of both of them made his wind glider unable to support them, and they began to descend. At that moment, Venti directed more airflow onto his wind glider. The descent immediately slowed down, and soon they were gliding towards the shore outside Mondstadt. Before long, they safely landed on solid ground. Chapter 129, The Worried Acting Grand Master, 2 in 1 chapter. Nolan retracted his wind glider's wings, tossing the Electro-Chechen mage casually onto the ground before helping the equally deep-sleeping golden-haired girl to stand up. Lumen's head rested on his shoulder, her soft lips slightly parted, revealing a glimpse of white teeth behind them when she exhaled warm breaths. Observing Lumen's peacefully closed eyes, Nolan gently patted her twice, feeling the warmth and smoothness of her skin. Perhaps his actions were too gentle, as Lumen only felt a bit dry on her lips. She stuck out her tongue to moisten them, then pursed her lips and continued to breathe evenly, showing no signs of waking up. What a heavy sleeper. Try pinching her nose and mouth, if she can't breathe, she'll definitely wake up. Paimon first complained with hands on her hips, then offered a suggestion. You can also use water. Suddenly chilling the skin can wake someone up too, added Venti, sharing his thoughts. Hey, won't that just get her clothes wet? It's uncomfortable to wear wet clothes. Paimon crossed her arms, arguing. Heh. Yeah, that's true. Venti chuckled, adjusting his hat with a smile. What does heh mean? What's so funny? I feel like giving you a nasty nickname. Paimon huffed, lifting her chin in a dismissive manner. I think Paimon's suggestion is better, Nolan nodded, pressing his index and thumb gently on Lumen's soft nose wings. Then he saw Lumen furrow her brows, naturally parting her lips wider, shifting her breathing process to her mouth. Hehe, let me handle this. Paimon pinched Lumen's philtrum and lower lip. With her breath completely cut off, Lumen suddenly opened her eyes wide, fully awake. Seeing this, Nolan and Paimon quickly released their hands. Cough, what just happened? Lumen lifted her head from Nolan's shoulder and took 2 quick breaths, her fair face slightly flushed from the rush. It's all because of this guy. When he used his song to attack the enemy, he accidentally affected you too. I was going to wake you up with water. Paimon pointed at Venti without mincing words. It was an unavoidable accident, Venti shrugged helplessly. Besides, both Paimon and Nolan managed to wake up the traveler smoothly, didn't they? Lumen didn't pay much attention to these, she just expressed her gratitude to everyone. Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 120 affection points, current affection level, LV.4, 135/400. Nolan glanced at the affinity notification that popped up on the character panel, nodding slightly with satisfaction. Now that we've captured the Electro-Chechen mage, let's interrogate her first and see if we can find out what the Fachui's conspiracy is. Yes, let's do that. Paimon nodded vigorously, smiling. Nolan and the others first tied up the Electro-Chechen mage and confiscated her purple delusion to prevent her from resisting upon waking up. This time, they didn't bother to be as delicate as waking up Lumen. Instead, Venti used the wind element to scoop up a handful of lake water and splashed it directly on the Electro-Chechen mage's face. The icy sensation interrupted her beautiful dream, and the Electro-Chechen mage woke up abruptly, shouting angrily. Who? Which idiot dared to do this? She was about to raise her hand and channel elemental power, but found it useless. Her delusion couldn't perceive anything, and her limbs were immobilized. Then, she saw several familiar figures appearing before her. Slowly, her memories of the previous events started to return, especially the fact that she had actually fallen asleep to the sound of the lyre. How could this be possible? She was one of the elite members of the Fachui who could accompany the lady, how could she be caught by a few unknown individuals? It was somewhat unbelievable to her. However, the reality was as such, and the Electro-Chechen mage could only look at the few people in front of her and threaten loudly, who are you people? Do you know who you're messing with? Alright, everyone knows you're a Fatui member, so spill it. Why did you go to steal the holy lyre to Himmel? What conspiracy does your Fatui executive, lady, have in Mondstadt? Nolan's lips curled up, forming a faint smile as he inquired. That's right, spill it, or we'll continue to beat you up. Paimon, wearing a golden crown, floated in the air with a majestic wave of her little fist. Humph, aren't you all here to steal the lyre too? And you have the nerve to ask me? The Electro-Chechen mage scoffed sarcastically. Oh? So you indeed covet the power of the Storm Terror? Venti stroked her chin, pondering aloud. No, of course not. If Nolan didn't understand the game plot, he might have been misled by the Electro-Chechen mage's appearance. It wasn't that the Fatui harbored no intentions towards the Storm Dragon, rather, they didn't solely have intentions towards it. The ultimate goal of the Fatui was undoubtedly to summon the Storm Dragon using the Holy Lyre to Himmel, then use the Storm Terror to lure out the Inmo Archon, Barbatos, and ultimately seize the Gnosis. In other words, their ultimate goal was you, Venti. Nolan glanced at the green-clad Inmo Archon with a glance. It's not that simple, is it? Unless you have a way to control the Storm Terror, what's the use of summoning it? Even if it's awakened now and its sanity is affected, normally it's one of Mondstadt's 4 Wines Guardians, why would it listen to you, members of the Fatui? Nolan attempted to find loopholes to extract more information from the Electro-Chechen mage. You don't need to worry about that. Our Lady naturally has her methods, the Electro-Chechen mage retorted stubbornly. Lumen's amber eyes calmly stared at her, her soft lips slightly parted as she spoke. You're lying. Back then, the Fatui delegation said they were going to deal with the Storm Terror, but in reality, you didn't want to, nor could you control it, right? The gentle breeze brushing across the surface of the lake gently disturbed her white skirt, revealing glimpses of her snow-white thighs beneath the knee-high boots. That's surprising. What benefit do you gain from going to such lengths to kill the Storm Terror? Venti's pupils revealed a hint of surprise, as he continued to contemplate. I understand now. As a dragon associated with the Inmo Archon, it would surely attract the Archon if it was in danger. So your target is actually the Inmo Archon, isn't it? What? Hearing Venti's words, even Paimon was astonished, covering her mouth in shock. If that's the case, it all makes sense. Lumen stared at the Electro-Chechen mage with a smirk playing on her lips. Whether it was Lumen or Venti, they were both very clever individuals, easily untangling various relationships and connecting the dots. You. How did you? The Electro-Chechen mage was now dumbfounded. She hadn't revealed anything, yet she was so easily guessed. So, what is your purpose in seeking out the Inmo Archon? Nolan asked the final question. As long as he could let Venti know in advance, perhaps they could protect the Gnosis from being taken away for nothing. Even if Venti ultimately chose to give away the Gnosis, which was of no use to him, they couldn't let it be taken away for nothing for Archon's sake, just like in the game plot. After all, the other Archons Geo, Electro, and Dendro had all willingly given theirs, while you, the Inmo Archon, were unclear and had it taken away after being kicked by someone else. No matter what, you have to exchange a sum of money for a drink in the future, right? Nolan thought, slightly speechless. Humph, do you think I would know all that so clearly? Such secrets can only be answered by asking Our Lady herself, the Electro-Chechen mage sneered, glancing aside. Well, since you don't know, there's no use in keeping you. Nolan approached her with a smile, taking 2 steps forward. Wait, you won't get away with this. The Electro-Chechen mage hadn't finished her sentence when she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her neck and consciousness slipped into darkness, fainting. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 2230 Adventure Express. Looking at the accumulated Adventure EXP, Nolan felt that it was worth being kicked by her earlier. Although the Electro-Chechen mage hadn't explained why they were seeking the Inmo Archon, with Venti's wisdom from living for so many years, he probably could guess some answers. I didn't expect the Fatui to be scheming like this, trying to lure you out, Venti. They're really a bunch of bad guys. Paimon stomped her foot in the air, indignantly, while Lumen's amber eyes also showed a worried expression. Geez, that's why we need to act fast to save Dvalin, so they won't have a chance to threaten me with it. Venti said, still not appearing too concerned. Now that we've got the holy lyre to Himmel, what's next? Nolan said as he took the lyre out of the delusion and handed it to Venti. The flowing wind-patterned rosewood and slightly cool star iron strings, it's really nostalgic, Venti said emotionally as he held the holy lyre to Himmel in his hands, but to use it to call Dvalin, we're still lacking something. Ah, why is that? Paimon rubbed her golden crown, feeling its cool metal texture, a little puzzled. After so many years have passed, the power of wind on the strings of the holy lyre to Himmel has long since been depleted, and we need to replenish it. Venti explained as he stroked the sky lyre. So that's how it is, then hurry up and channel the wind element to it to replenish its wind power. Paimon struggled to think of a suitable word to describe replenish the lyre with wind elements, and ultimately gave up after failing to come up with one. Haha, Paimon, the usual method of attaching wind elements is far from sufficient. The concentration of wind elements is still too low, and it's difficult to maintain continuously. Moreover, there's a risk of damaging the holy lyre to Himmel if not careful, Venti laughed and explained. Oh, is that so? Paimon scratched her white hair, puzzled. So, it actually needs tears of the wind dragon to repair it, which is also the reason why you're collecting them, Venti, Lumen speculated, taking out purified red crystals. Hehe, indeed, as expected of a traveler, you've figured it out. Dvalin's tears contain pure and rich wind elements, just a simple drop on the holy lyre to Himmel can replenish its wind element, Venti said with a smile. Well then, no time to waste. Lumen, go ahead and give it a try, Nolan said without surprise. Lumen nodded lightly and took 2 steps forward with her legs wrapped in knee-high white boots, approaching the holy lyre to Himmel. She let the crystal-clear tear of the storm dragon drop onto the strings of the lyre. Like liquid, it was easily absorbed by the strings, and gradually, each string seemed to glow with vitality. Wow, it looks even prettier now. Paimon exclaimed, twisting in the air, seeming quite excited. But it's still not enough. We need more wind elements. Help me drop another one, Venti said, feeling that the holy lyre to Himmel was indeed in much better condition than before, and the wind elements within it had not continued to deplete. However, there was still a long way to go to reach the level where it could call Dvalin. He took out another purified teardrop crystal and handed it to Lumen. Okay. As the second wind dragon teardrop dropped, the holy lyre to Himmel blossomed with a burst of light, and it felt like the flavor of the wind element on it was even stronger. However, it should still be insufficient. Nolan remembered that in the plot, more than 2 tears of the wind dragon were used to repair the holy lyre to Himmel. Nolan thought so. It's as expected. Just 2 tears are not enough. Traveler, adventurer buddy, we need to find more tears of the storm terror, Venti sighed regretfully. Ah, why do we have to collect Dvalin's tears again? Where can we find them? Paimon spread her hands helplessly. It's indeed troublesome, and with just a few of us, who knows how long it will take to find them, Lumen, with her hands wrapped in long sleeves, said, placing them beneath her chest. Nolan pondered for a moment and then said. Why don't we explain the situation to the acting Grand Master and ask for her help? After all, the longer it takes, the greater the chance the Abyss Order will succeed in controlling Dvalin. Yes, and we can also ask the Knights of Favonius to help us find them. At the same time, we can hand over these Fatui to the acting Grand Master, saying that she sneaked into the cathedral trying to steal the holy lyre to Himmel and was stopped by us. Paimon said happily, looking at the Electro-Chechen mage on the ground. That's right. With this handle, I believe the diplomatic mission to Snezhnia won't dare to meddle with the Knights of Favonius openly, Lumen said, her ember eyes shining brightly. It seems that's the only way. Let's hope you 2 honorable knights can be of some use this time and gain the trust of our acting Grand Master, Venti said, looking at Nolan and Lumen with a smile. If all else fails, you could just reveal your identity as the Enmo Archon, Nolan replied with a smile. As Nolan and the others acted, it was already 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Chasing the Electro-Chechen mage also took quite some time. Therefore, when they arrived at the Knights of Favonius headquarters, the night sky was already filled with stars. Entering the Knights of Favonius hall and knocking on the door of the acting Grand Master's office, they found that Jean was sitting at her desk with a worried expression. Ah, the crisis of the storm terror has not been resolved, and she was just informed of the news that Mondstadt's treasure, the holy lyre to Himmel, was stolen by the Fatui. How could the acting Grand Master not be worried? Hehe, acting Grand Master Jean, we're here again. Paimon shouted. The noise from Paimon's voice made Jean feel a bit uncomfortable, and she rubbed her temples. Looking up at the unexpected visitors, she said with some surprise, Oh, Paimon, 2 honorable knights, and a stranger. Is there something I can help you with? Chapter 130, The Angel's Share. In the headquarters of the Knights of Favonius, in the office of the acting Grand Master. Candles flickered on the chandelier on the ceiling, emitting a bright yellow light that illuminated the entire room. Whether sitting or standing, the shadows cast by the people appeared darker. The desk of the acting Grand Master was piled high with documents, casting long shadows on the soft legs of Jean, who was wearing tight white pants, as if covered with a semi-transparent black filter. One could imagine her level of busyness, most likely due to the trouble caused by the wind disaster. Grand Master Jean, we have found a way to save Storm Terror, Lumen said with a smile on her fair face. Jean closed a file she had just approved, showing a slightly surprised expression. She hadn't expected a turnaround to happen so quickly. She put down the quill she was using to write and gently massaged the sides of her thighs with her fair hands, relieving the numbness from sitting for too long, while saying, "Traveler, please tell me more." "Hehe, let me tell, let me tell." Paimon, dressed in all white, eagerly interjected before Lumen could speak. Lumen, with her waist covered by a dress, looked at her helplessly, then sighed and said, "Fine, you go ahead. It's like this. After we left the Knights of Favonius HQ this morning, we met a bard, this guy." Paimon's wandering gaze stopped on Venti as she spoke. "A bard?" Jean's elbows rested on the table, her fair fingers intertwined under her chin, her eyes showing a hint of doubt. What kind of bard would know how to save Storm Terror? Then Venti said he could use the Holy Lyre der Himmel to summon Storm Terror, so we went to the cathedral to borrow it from Nungatland. But we found out that the Fatui people also had intentions for it, so we caught her, and now we have the Holy Lyre der Himmel. Paimon briefly recounted the events. Jean, sitting with her legs together, nodded after listening, feeling slightly relieved. At least she didn't have to worry about losing the Holy Lyre der Himmel anymore. "So you didn't actually intend to borrow the Holy Lyre der Himmel, but rather to steal it. Then you found out that the Fatui member had also infiltrated the cathedral's underground." Jean couldn't help but complain as she looked at them. In the end, whether there were Fatui or not, the Holy Lyre der Himmel would still be lost. "Hehe," Paimon scratched his head in embarrassment, and then accused Venti, "It's all because this bard was abetting us. In fact, we didn't want to steal anything at all. If you want to arrest him, just arrest him." "Oh Paimon, you're putting all the blame on me, it's so heartbreaking," Venti said, clutching his chest in a pained manner. "Now that you have the Holy Lyre der Himmel, do you still want to deny it?" Paimon crossed her arms and looked away, showing that she was shifting the blame. Grand Master Jean, besides explaining the situation, we also need your help in solving the Mondstadt crisis and saving Storm Terror." Nolan ignored the two arguing people and got straight to the point with Jean. "Do you want to continue borrowing the Holy Lyre der Himmel? If the method is indeed feasible, I can vouch for you," Jean said, crossing her right leg over her left under the table, her feet in white boots slightly raised, after thinking for a moment. "This should be useful, but the Holy Lyre der Himmel has suffered severe power loss and still needs to find some high-purity wind element materials for repair and supplementation." Nolan continued, explaining that the red crystal-like tear was Dvalin's tears and could be purified by Lumen. After purification, it successfully served as advanced wind element materials, replenishing part of the lost power of the Holy Lyre, but it was still not enough, so they needed the Knights of Favonius to help find more. "I see. But unfortunately, Storm Terror caused a wind disaster in Mondstadt, causing the citizens to blame it deeply. If the Knights of Favonius take any actions to show goodwill towards it, it will definitely be misunderstood by the Fatui. So, accusing them of attempting to steal the supreme treasure of the Inmo Archon, the Holy Lyre der Himmel, will not be effective." As the acting Grand Master, Jean had to consider many aspects, especially when the actions of the Knights of Favonius during such a crisis would be magnified, and she couldn't afford to be caught by people with malicious intentions. "Ah, I didn't expect Grand Master Jean to bear such pressure," Paimon said somewhat surprised. Currently, Jean is basically the highest-ranking administrator in Mondstadt. People who haven't reached this position really can't imagine the enormity of that responsibility. However, even though the Knights of Favonius can't undertake large-scale operations, personally, I still want to do everything I can to help everyone, so I'd like to ask you to meet someone." Jean interlocked her hands and rested them on her abdomen, leaning back on her soft thighs. Her shawl slipped off slightly, revealing her snow-white back, her face showing a pensive expression. "Meet someone? Could it be someone even more powerful than Grand Master Jean?" Paimon asked in confusion. It's someone who protects Mondstadt in their own way. Jean stood up from her chair, not saying much more. Someone who protects Mondstadt. Lumen, with her arms in white long sleeves crossed over her chest, lowered her chin in thought, wondering who Grandmaster Jean's predecessor could be. Oh, it's probably Master Diluc, the Dark Knight hero of Mondstadt. Nolan thought to himself. Next, the acting Grand Master first instructed 2 of the Knights of Favonius to take the still unconscious Electro-Chechen mage to the prison, then sighed as she looked at the documents on her desk. I can't leave right now, so I can only write a letter for you to take. She took out clean paper and an envelope from the cabinet in her desk and wrote beautiful words with a quill. Grand Master Jean isn't going with them? Nolan looked somewhat dumbfounded at the situation. It was probably his appearance that led to some slight changes in the details of the game plot. For example, originally, Electro-Chechen Mage would have successfully taken the Holy Lyre, and Traveler and Venti would have been wanted during their escape, temporarily hiding in Diluc's tavern with his help to evade pursuit by the Knights of Favonius. Then they would continue with the plot of finding the stronghold of the Fatui and reclaiming the Holy Lyre to Himmel with the help of Diluc's underground intelligence network. During that time, he had also invited the acting Grand Master Jean to come over and help. But now Nolan and the others managed to capture the Electro-Chechen Mage, and most importantly, the Holy Lyre to Himmel was not stolen. Then it was reasonable for Grand Master Jean to feel that the situation was still under control and choose to finish the more important things first. After all, the search for the red crystals relied heavily on Diluc's underground intelligence network, and it would be difficult for her to play a role in the past for a while. Not long after, Jean folded the written letter and placed it in the envelope, then sealed it with a red wax seal bearing the emblem of the Knights of Favonius. She handed the letter to Nolan and said, "Go to the Angel's Share Tavern, find the owner there, Diluc, and deliver the letter from the Knights of Favonius to him. I believe that after understanding the situation, he will assist you." "Got it." Nolan took the letter and nodded in agreement. "Well then, don't delay. I entrust the task of saving Storm Terror and resolving the crisis in Mondstadt to you." Jean smiled faintly. "Jean has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 200 affection points, current affection level LV.4, 230/400. 200 affection points? The increase seems significant. It should be due to the title of Honorable Knight playing some role." Nolan thought silently. Chapter 131, The Rising Fame of Little Paimon? 8 o'clock in the evening, Angel's Share Tavern. Many adventurers who ventured into the wilderness for dangerous exploration gathered inside and outside the tavern, drinking wine and sharing their adventure stories of the day. Nolan and the others approached from afar, seeing the lively scene outside the tavern, and unexpectedly spotting Jack, a former member of Bennett's adventurer team. "Haha, Jack, you can't be an adventurer if you don't drink. Only adventurers who can hold their liquor are qualified adventurers. Come on, let's drink this cup together." A burly man with a full beard patted the thinner newcomer adventurer next to him and said, "Ah, Mr. Matt, please don't hand me the wine glass. I've already said I'm not used to drinking." Jack, in his green adventurer outfit, quickly pushed away Matt's muscular arm. "You've been knocked out by a hilly churl today, how can you not have a drink to make up for it?" Adventurer Matt laughed heartily. On the outdoor tables not far from them, a short-haired adventurer watched Jack and his group, took a gulp of beer, then turned to sigh with his companion. "Ugh, blame it on that stupid Storm Terror, blowing away the tiles of my house with its windstorm. I've been busy all day repairing it. How many treasure chests do I need to find to earn back the mora spent on repairing the roof? You're lucky. The other day, I forgot to close the windows in my room, and that damn Storm Terror actually took away all my hidden money. Sigh, you know, my wife usually doesn't give me mora for coming to the tavern to drink, so today this drink money, he the companion of the short-haired adventurer said with a smile. I know, all the roof tiles have been replaced, we don't need your 2 drinks. The beer brewed by Dawn Winery is really rich in wheat flavor. By the way, we can still drink here now, thanks to those 2 heroes who defeated Storm Terror. I heard they've been honored by the Knights of Favonius as honorable knights. It's really admirable." "Really? I heard one of them is a young adventurer with the appearance of a traveler from Liu and the other is a blonde girl with a flying fairy. It's a pity that I didn't witness the scene where they fought off the dragon." The short-haired adventurer seemed to have endless emotions. Defeating a dragon was something legendary, he had only heard Master Cyrus mention it when he was drunk, but had never had the chance to witness it himself. It seems like a few people over there. What's wrong? Nothing, it just seems like I saw those two you mentioned entering the tavern. Maybe I'm drunk and seeing things. The companion of the short-haired adventurer shook his head, looking confused. He, didn't think we were actually this famous. He group entered the tavern, which was equally lively inside. Paimon heard the discussion outside and held her little fists slightly excitedly. Geez, I remember it was the traveler and the adventurer buddy who defeated Storm Terror, why are you so excited? Venti looked at her with a smile and said. What the heck, didn't they mention a flying fairy as well, so they must be talking about me. Paimon clasped her hands and lifted her chin slightly with a smug look on her face. Lumen lightly chuckled at Paimon's demeanor, then walked towards the bar, her white skirt swaying slightly as she moved her legs clad in knee-high boots, with a faint shadow beneath her snow-white thighs. In front of her, a young man with red hair was slightly lowering his head, wiping the glass in his hand. Hello, what would you like to drink? The redhead paused his movement and calmly asked the visitors. Hello, we're here to see the owner. Lumen replied politely. Diluc paused for a moment, then nodded, what's the matter? Hehe, we have some private matters, not convenient for you to know. Paimon flew up with a spin and smiled. I am the owner. Speak up. Diluc sighed and continued wiping the glass. Paimon and Lumen hesitated slightly. I can't believe someone doesn't recognize Master Diluc, he's such a prominent figure in Mondstadt. Venti pretended to be surprised and smiled. Ah, traveler, look, he's mocking us again. We've only been in Mondstadt for a few days, isn't it normal not to know? Paimon stamped her foot angrily in mid-air. I see, so it's you, the outsiders who defeated Storm Terror. Diluc, with red hair, looked at the humanoid Pokémon, flying fairy-type Pokémon Hehe, and the golden-haired girl. With these two prominent elements, a slight association matched the information he had obtained. Wow, does even Master Diluc know us? Paimon exclaimed in surprise. I've heard a bit. Diluc didn't deny it, then calmly asked again, so, what's the matter with you guys coming to me? His gaze swept over the several visitors in front of him that he wasn't familiar with. The strange little flying fairy, the golden-haired traveler, the eccentric bard, and Diluc noticed Nolan's slight hesitation and the flash of surprise in his expression. The young adventurer he had met once seemed to have taken part in the battle to repel the dragon, and from the information he had gathered, it seemed that he had practiced the ordinary Favonius archery to an extraordinary level of secret transmission. It seemed he had been a bit lazy in not investigating him thoroughly earlier. The appearance of such a talent in Mondstadt was worth pondering, and Diluc subtly raised the corner of his mouth. Nolan didn't realize he had once again entered the sight of this Dark Knight hero. He approached the bar and took out the letter, handing it over, saying, We've encountered some difficulties in dealing with the Storm Terror incident and would like to request your assistance. It was recommended to us by Acting Grand Master Jean. Nolan added, fearing he might not care. Oh. Diluc took the letter and looked at the knight's emblem on the red wax seal, feeling somewhat surprised. What's the big deal that made the Acting Grand Master mention me to you? Although he officially had no affiliation with the Knights of Favonius, he was still considered one of Mondstadt's more important covered forces. If it wasn't an important and difficult to solve matter, generally they wouldn't seek him out. Not long after, Diluc finished reading the opened letter, understanding the situation and the specific help they needed. I see. You want to find the red crystals left by Storm Terror, which are its tears. That's right. Paimon nodded his head twice heavily. No problem. Come back tomorrow night after the tavern closes, and I'll provide you with the information you need. Suddenly, a flame ignited in Diluc's hand, incinerating the letter. He maintained a calm expression on his face. Ah! Paimon was startled and instinctively recoiled. 1 day's time? Nolan quickly assessed in his mind. It seemed relatively fast, considering there wasn't an internet in Teyvat. Even with strong intelligence-gathering abilities, there still needed to be time for information to be passed around. Chapter 132, Teardrop Intelligence, 2 in 1 chapter. Seriously, why make such a scary move all of a sudden? Paimon crossed her arms, staring displeasedly at the red-haired youth. Diluc didn't respond. He took out a clean cloth and wiped the table, where a few ashes had fallen. Hehe, since Master Diluc is so willing, then we'll wait patiently for good news. Venti chuckled lightly, then said to the others, Oh my, I still want to drink here for a while. Let's meet again tomorrow. No problem, we'll head out first. Nolan nodded and left the tavern with Lumen and Paimon, walking outside. As it hadn't been long since they entered, the adventurers who had discussed them earlier were still chatting away inside. Nearby, Jack seemed to have had too much to drink and was slumped over the table. Outside, another group of people were toasting and drinking, creating a lively scene. Looking at them, I feel a bit hungry too. It seems like everyone hasn't had dinner yet. Paimon floated along the road, rubbing her stomach. Lumen stretched her arms, the dim streetlights reflecting off her armpits and side chest, creating soft wrinkles where they met. She parted her lips and yawned, smiling at the young adventurer beside her, saying, I treated at lunch, so it's your turn for dinner. Nolan pondered for a moment, then nodded. That's not a bad idea. Since it's late, why don't we go to my place? Cooking ourselves is cheap and practical. And my rented house and the inn you're staying in are on the same street, so it's convenient to go back. Paimon floated in front of him, looking at him with some suspicion. What are you talking about being cheap and practical? You won't just whip up some stir-fried shredded pork and call it a day, will you? Remember, we had a big meal at lunch. Yeah, if it's too half-hearted, Lumen placed her hands on the sides of her waist, the backless white dress hugging her figure, and looked over with a slight smile. Don't worry, although my cooking skills are average, I know quite a few tricks. I'll try my best to whip up a perfect meal for you guys on the spot. Nolan assured, patting his chest. Hehe, that's what you said. Paimon looked pleasantly surprised, seeming to sense Nolan's enthusiasm. Paimon has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 150 affection points. Current affection level, LV3, 90/300. Lumen's fair face lit up with a smile. I'm looking forward to it. Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 100 affection points. Current affection level, LV4, 235/400. When they arrived at Valberry Street, Nolan's home, Lumen and Paimon both showed surprised expressions at the two-story exquisite house. I didn't expect you to be so wealthy, living in such a beautiful house. Paimon widened her starry eyes and looked at him. Haha, it's the property of Eula, the captain of the Knight's reconnaissance team. Since I'm acquainted with her, she rented it to me cheaply. Nolan explained briefly, then led them inside. The high-heeled over-the-knee boots stepped on the ground in the courtyard, and Lumen, with a puzzled expression, asked, Eula? The captain of the reconnaissance team? It seems I haven't seen her in the Knights of Favonius. Because she's on an outside mission. I reckon she'll be back soon for a break, Nolan speculated as he entered the living room. Wow, being able to rent such a beautiful house cheaply, the captain of the reconnaissance team must be quite wealthy, hehe. I really want to be friends with her. Paimon rubbed her hands together, revealing a greedy look. Lumen watched her with a helpless expression, rubbing her forehead as she walked away. She settled onto the light blue soft sofa in the living room, her soft buttocks sinking slightly into the cushions. She propped her right foot on tiptoe, stretching her legs out and sinking into the plush backrest. Finally, I can rest for a while. The golden-haired girl sighed softly. Feeling more tired in Mondstadt than during wilderness travels, Lumen was relieved to have found the Inmo Archon and hoped Venti could provide some clues about her brother. Meanwhile, Paimon curiously explored the exquisite two-story building while Nolan busied himself preparing dinner in the kitchen. Before long, a series of dishes, looking appetizing and probably delicious, were neatly arranged on the table. Paimon's mouth was watering, but instead of diving in eagerly, she looked towards the light blue sofa, preparing to call her best friend. Traveler, dinner's ready. Why are you asleep? Paimon scratched her head, a puzzled expression on her face. On the sofa, Lumen had leaned back against the backrest and drifted off to sleep. Her chest gently rose and fell, and her lips exhaled evenly. Is she too tired? Nolan, about to sit down for dinner, also noticed Lumen sleeping. It seems so. Since arriving in Mondstadt, the traveler hasn't had much sleep, always on the move, so we'd better not disturb her rest for now. Paimon said, rubbing his chin, then spoke to Nolan in a concerned tone, won't it be uncomfortable for the traveler to sleep like this? Why don't you fetch a pillow and help her take off her boots, adjust her sleeping position? You're quite the taskmaster, Paimon, Nolan teased, but he didn't refuse. Oh, please. I'm so small, How could I possibly move her? Don't tease me like that, I'll give you a nickname too. Paimon hugged her arms, turning her cheek away as if to ignore him. Later on, Nolan fetched his pillow from the room and had Paimon hold it while he squatted down in front of Lumen's legs. He gently lifted Lumen's leg with his left hand, feeling the extreme softness in his palm and fingers, while his right hand continued to lightly loosen her boot from her ankle. Then, with a gentle tug, the boot slid off her leg, revealing pure white semi-transparent stockings underneath. Compared to wearing boots, there was a warm and smooth touch as his palm supported them. After removing both boots, Nolan had Paimon place the pillow at one end of the sofa, allowing Lumen to rest her cheek on it while lifting her legs onto the sofa. He then covered her with a thin blanket, ensuring her comfort. As time passed, morning arrived. The dim light seeped through the windows, illuminating the living room, ultimately falling on the light blue sofa. Yawning, Lumen rubbed her eyes and opened them. Feeling relaxed, she suddenly felt something pressing against her stomach. Lifting the thin blanket covering her, she saw Paimon, without her golden crown, fast asleep on her abdomen, a droplet of saliva at the corner of her mouth. Like she was dreaming of something delicious. Oh, speaking of food, did she sleep over at Nolan's place last night? Lumen thought awkwardly. Ah, you're awake, traveler. Time for breakfast. Paimon popped up from under the covers, yawning. You were sleeping so soundly last night that I didn't want to wake you. So, you had to make do on the sofa. Oh, I see. Wait, what about the inn? Lumen suddenly realized she might have wasted the 8,000 mora she spent on renting the inn. Why don't you just stay here? There are spare rooms anyway, and it's better than spending so much on an inn, Nolan suggested, coming out of the kitchen with breakfast. Hee, that's right. The conditions here are even better than the inn. Let's stay here for a while until we earn some mora, Paimon agreed, smiling. Wouldn't that be too much trouble? Lumen hesitated. Staying at the inn might deplete her savings, especially considering Paimon's unexpectedly large appetite. Why would it be? Think of it as roommates. Besides, you're an honorable knight. Just mention it to Captain Eula, and I'm sure she won't have a problem with it. Nolan suggested after some thought. After all, this place was rented to him cheaply by Eula. Others might not have the same treatment, so it was polite to inform her regardless. Well, thank you then, Lumen said, glancing at the over-the-knee boots lying next to the sofa. She stretched out her feet, unzipped the boots with her hands, and nodded in agreement. Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 200 affection points. Current affection level, LV5, 35/500. It wasn't beyond Nolan's expectations that Lumen would agree. After all, her previous affection for him was at level 4, indicating a good friendship. Living under the same roof wouldn't be a problem with the right opportunity. After breakfast, they went out to buy some daily necessities, then returned to tidy up the unused room on the second floor. It took them about 2 hours to finish. Later, they went to the Adventurers Guild, where Lumen registered as an adventurer and familiarized herself with the specific procedures with Nolan's help. The commission was issued in the Adventurers Guild because there was a lot of repair work in the city after the storm, and a certain construction team didn't have enough manpower and needed help urgently. The commission fee wasn't high, just 20,000 mora per person, more or less equivalent to a day's temporary work. At 6 p.m., after successfully receiving the commission fee, they returned home, had dinner, and rested for a while. Then, nearing midnight when Angel's Share Tavern was about to close, they began heading there. Not long after, Nolan and the others arrived at the tavern again, just in time to see the last customer leaving. Hey, Master Dai, look, we're back! Paimon shouted as she flew into the tavern, followed closely by Nolan and Lumen. Oh, hey there! You're right on time, Venti belched, his face still slightly flushed. I just got here myself. From afternoon till now, you've spent 120,000 mora here. If you can't pay, you can stay back and wash glasses, Master Dai, look, today doubling as a bartender, said calmly to the somewhat disheveled bard. He had long noticed that this guy had been hanging around without a penny in his pocket. Ahem, what about Nolan and Lumen? Diluc's words made Venti feel a bit embarrassed as he glanced at the newcomers. You singing bard? You've spent over 100,000 mora in just one afternoon. We don't have that kind of money to lend you. Paimon stomped angrily in mid-air. Just yesterday, she and the traveler were worrying about mora, and now this guy had spent so much in just one afternoon. What's the point of being the Inmo Archon if you're not going to act like one? Barbatos has this problem, not only does he love drinking, but he also loves expensive drinks. Gods can be picky too. Nolan commented somewhat exasperatedly. Yeah, I think cleaning up the tavern suits you, Lumen said with a hint of a smile, her fair hands resting on her waist. Haha, traveler, you're kidding, right? Venti pretended to be adorable and widened his eyes. In the end, Diluc didn't actually make Nolan and the others pay. He allowed them to owe him, considering they were all working together to solve Mondstadt's crisis. As for finding the Tears of the Storm Terror, I've gathered plenty of clues, Diluc said, laying out a map of Mondstadt on the counter. The group gathered around, focusing their gaze on it, noticing a red circle drawn around the Thousand Wines Temple and two in the Dodapa Gorge. According to the information I've gathered, the Storm Terror has recently been seen in these areas. If there's a place where the Storm Terror's tears are most likely to be found, it's undoubtedly these locations, Diluc stated calmly. Wow, Master Diluc, you're really reliable, Paimon said, somewhat amazed. To gather such detailed information in just a day. So, we just need to follow the map to search in those areas. Nolan tapped his head lightly, asking. It had been quite a while, and he didn't remember the specific details of the game's plot, but with his increased strength and memory, he vaguely recalled these locations. It seemed they also had to deal with monsters or something. That's right, the red-haired Diluc said, folding his arms. Tomorrow morning, bring 2 more helpers with you. The Abyss Order is very cunning, and they might cause some trouble. Hearing Diluc's words, Nolan's expression turned thoughtful. If he didn't remember wrongly, wanting to clean the poisonous blood in Dvalin's body in order to save it actually relied on Lumen's purification power. After all, the Storm Terror teardrops, also known as the red crystals, flowed out of its body. Both powers aligned. If Lumen could purify the tears, she could naturally cleanse Dvalin's blood. And in the game's plot, after Venti and the others repaired the Holy Lyre, they hadn't had much of a chance to speak with Dvalin before suddenly appearing Abyss Mages disrupted everything. And they even damaged the Holy Lyre in the process. If they really brought a few more people as Diluc suggested, took out the Abyss Mages in advance, and prevented the Storm Terror from escaping, their plan should proceed smoothly. At the end of the game's plot, it was still going to be a fight with the Storm Dragon anyway. There's nothing wrong with being a little ahead of schedule, right? Chapter 133, The Black Sun Clan. After discussing the details of their plan with Diluc at the tavern, Nolan, Lumen, and Paimon made their way to the Knights of Favonius headquarters. Even though it was late at night, the acting Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius was still at work. From outside, they could see the light still emanating from her office. The shadow of someone sitting in a chair, constantly signing documents, was cast upon the window. They could clearly see the slight swaying of the single ponytail. Nolan pushed open the still unlocked main door of the hall and lightly knocked on the door to the acting Grand Master's office. Please come in, came the voice of the acting Grand Master from inside the office after a moment of silence. With a click, the doorknob twisted and the wooden door was pushed open. Oh, it's you. What brings you here at this late hour? The acting Grand Master Jean, with her golden ponytail, raised her hands to the back of her head to adjust her hair. Her snow-white skin was generously illuminated by the candlelight. Hee, good evening, Grand Master. Sorry to bother you at this hour, Paimon politely greeted as they entered the office, then explained, we have some information regarding the Tears of the Dragon. Jean, having finished arranging her hair, leaned against the desk and slightly shook her head as she spoke, have you already found their whereabouts? Yes, Master Diluc is truly amazing. In just one day, he managed to track the movements of the Storm Terror and roughly deduced the possible locations where the red crystals might exist. Paimon nodded heavily, smiling. Well, since there are quite a few locations, to save time, we've come to ask for assistance. Lumen, standing with her legs slightly apart in white over-the-knee boots, continued from where Paimon left off. It would be best to invite Captain Kaya and the others. Once the Holy Lyre is repaired, we should be able to summon the Storm Terror. Then, let Lumen try to purify the poisonous blood within it. During this time, we may face disruptions from the Abyss Order, or even conflict with the Storm Terror, Nolan informed the acting Grand Master of the detailed plan they had discussed at the tavern. I see, I understand. Jean leaned slightly forward, her hands supporting her chest, her fair jaw slightly nodding as she continued, however, the knights cannot be left without leadership. Kaya and Amber are out of the question. Tomorrow morning, I will bring Lisa and join you in the operation. Nolan nodded in agreement. With the addition of the acting Grand Master, Jean, and Lisa, even with the absence of Kaya and Amber, and with Venti, dealing with the storm terror shouldn't be a major issue. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the Angel's Share Tavern. The sky was just beginning to lighten, and usually, few people would come to drink at this time, but surprisingly, it was quite lively today. Although Master Diluc's information network has identified the general area, to accurately locate the tears of the dragon, we need someone who can sense them. Can any of you do it? Venti asked, rubbing his chin, addressing the group. For me, observing the flow of general elemental energy is quite simple, but it's difficult to sense the concentrated wind elemental crystals unless they're relatively close, Lisa, clad in purple robes and wearing a pointed witch's hat, replied. She seemed a bit listless, yawning and covering her mouth with her hand, revealing a tired look from lack of sleep. Hehe, Traveler has elemental sight, so she should be able to do it. Paimon floated next to Lumen, hands behind her back, smiling. I think I should be able to do it too. Nolan revealed his golden eye of judgment ability. Many people had seen this ability before, so there was nothing to hide. In that case, we can split into 2 teams to search at the same time, Jean said, one hand crossed over her chest, the other supporting her fair chin. But they were still one person short. It seemed they would have to choose 2 from among them for now. You should be able to do it too, Diluc looked at the boy in green. In fact, Venti's true identity wasn't hard to guess. After all, knowing the secrets about the storm terror, and claiming to be able to summon it with the sounds of the holy lyre, how could such an individual be an ordinary poet? The only one who could connect all these things was the Inmo Archon, Barbatos. Oh, looks like you've figured it out. Since that's the case, I can't hide it anymore. Actually, I am the one and only Barbatos that you've been thinking of. How about that, surprised and unexpected, right? Venti's face showed some surprise, then he arrogantly lifted his chin, hands on his hips. Diluc's eye twitched. He must have guessed wrong. How could such an awkward fellow be the Inmo Archon? Wow, it really is unexpected. Lisa, who wasn't very familiar with Venti, truly hadn't noticed. Jean had suspected before, but hadn't come to a conclusion yet. Although he's the Inmo Archon, he seems like a friendly guy. Let's just treat him normally, Paimon joked, worried that everyone might feel awkward after learning Venti's identity. Master Diluc, you mustn't let him off the hook for the drinks just because he's a god. Oh, little Paimon, how could you think that of me? Venti looked genuinely hurt. Of course not, Diluc said calmly. Regardless, Venti revealing his identity didn't change the fact that he was just an awkward poet. But the Inmo Archon should be able to sense the location of the Inmo crystal, so the last storm terror's tears can be left to him to find. To prevent falling into an ambush by the Abyss Order, everyone paired up as they did when they went to the temple last time. Lisa and Nolan had teamed up before, so they volunteered to team up again. Jean followed Lumen and Paimon, while Master Diluc and Venti formed another team. They finally agreed that after finding the storm terror's tears, they would rendezvous at the Star Snatch Cliff. Miss Lisa, can't we use spatial teleportation like we did last time? They had been walking for a while now, and Nolan asked the lazy lady next to him with a hint of confusion. Oh, little adventurer, using spatial teleportation magic requires knowing the specific coordinates, otherwise, you might end up randomly teleporting and sending yourself straight into the abyss. Lisa, swinging her legs wrapped in lace stockings, gently pursed her soft lips and said. Oh, is that so? Nolan's face showed some surprise. Then, as if he had remembered something, he took out another delusion from the pyro-elemental delusion he wore. This was the electro-elemental delusion taken from the Electro-Chechen mage. Miss Lisa, can you please help me modify this one too? With 2 elemental delusion, can I use 2 types of elements at once? Nolan asked with some anticipation. Could it be that he could trigger reactions on his own in the future? He himself doubted whether such a thing could really be done so easily. Well, little adventurer, your idea is not bad, but... Lisa's face showed a pensive expression, then she flicked the chestnut-colored ends of her hair by her ear end, with her fair ears revealed from behind the strands of hair, looked ahead and said. Oh, this is the tribe of the hilly churl of the Black Sun clan. Let's get hold of the storm terror's tears from this location first, and then I'll tell you more details. End of chapter. Chapter 134, Purple Turns Black. Following the main road through the Wines Rise Valley leads to the Dadapa Gorge, where there are 3 large hilly Churl tribes, and the Black Sun clan aka Eclipse tribe is one of them. The other 2 were the Meaty tribe in the north and the Sleeper tribe in the south. The Black Sun tribe was located in the east of the canyon, and it was near this tribe that Diluc's underground intelligence network had found traces of the Storm Terror's presence. However, they didn't find any red crystals at that location, so it's highly likely that the hilly Churls of the Black Sun clan took them. After Nolan and Lisa rushed over and found nothing, Nolan activated his golden eye of judgment to follow the traces of the wind element all the way here. Compared to the usual hill Churl camps, the Black Day clan's settlement appeared much larger. Outside, there was a crude wooden fence encircling it, and in every corner inside, there was a watchtower with a hilly Churl holding a crossbow, ready to shoot at any moment. Such high discipline was somewhat incredible for the hilly Churl race. It was clear that the influence of the Abyss Order was behind it. "Miss Lisa, let me sneak in first and scout things out." After all, this was reality, not a game. Even though Lisa was likely to prevent any accidents, it wouldn't be good if he got hurt. It was better to be cautious, even if he was proficient in stealth. Lisa, with her fair arms crossed beneath the snowy fabric covering her chest, shook her head slightly. "I sense a formidable opponent inside for you. There's a high chance you'll be detected if you sneak in. If anything were to happen to you, I'd be really upset, you know." "Oh, so are you going to take action, Miss Lisa?" Nolan paused for a moment, then furrowed his brows slightly. Since Lisa said there was an opponent inside that he couldn't handle, it was unlikely to be false. His stealth was just optical camouflage, after all, and it wouldn't make much difference against a powerful foe. "I guess that's the only way. Little adventurer, make some noise to attract it out," Lisa said, her purple skirt swaying slightly in the wind as she tapped her fair chin with her index finger. "All right, no problem." Nolan nodded in response. The camp was teeming with monsters, and it was their territory. Rushing in recklessly might result in being quickly surrounded, whereas outside, they didn't have the geographical advantage. It was simple to lure them out, just launch an attack. It was a good opportunity to practice attaching fire elemental energy to arrows. Nolan took out the adventurer's hunting bow from the delusion, and an armor-piercing arrow appeared on the drawn bowstring with the slightest movement of his thoughts. In no time at all, the elemental energy released from the delusion gathered onto the arrowhead, and a crimson glow emanated from it. The entire process took about 3 seconds, much slower than Amber or Fiscal, mainly because he wasn't yet proficient. Nolan hid behind a tree, using the dense foliage and sturdy trunk to shield himself. He aimed at the hilly Churl holding a bow on the watchtower. As he released his hand, the red elemental arrow pierced the hilly Churl's head without leaving a trace, even turning its bone mask slightly charred. Defeat a powerful enemy, obtain 201 Adventure Express. Yay! Another hilly Churl on a watchtower noticed the anomaly and immediately sounded the alarm. Its gaze searched left and right, but for a moment, it didn't spot where the arrow had come from. After all, Nolan's arrows had the extraordinary characteristic of being shadowless and silent. During the few seconds the hilly Churl was dazed, Nolan's second arrow, already imbued with fire elemental energy, was shot. Defeat a powerful enemy, obtain 232 Adventure Express. As the 2 hilly Churls on the watchtowers fell, roars of anger erupted from the Black Sun clan's camp. A group of hilly Churl mobs rushed out of the camp, some carrying wooden shields, others wielding axes, and a few holding large explosive barrels made from slime. Level, 35, level, 41. A total of 9 large-bodied hilly Churl thugs appeared, with the lowest level being above level 35. It's no wonder they were able to stand tall in the Dadapa Gorge for so long as one of the hilly Churl tribes. Indeed, they had quite impressive overall strength. If Nolan had come alone, he definitely wouldn't dare to provoke them and would have stayed far away. At this moment, they were also observing where the enemy was. 2 hilly Churls with bows had reappeared on the empty watchtowers. Not long after, hilly Churl shamans and charging hilly Churl fighters with torches emerged, pouring out in waves, a dense mass that seemed to darken the surroundings. Lisa, standing behind Nolan, took 2 steps forward in her black high heels. The deep purple gemstone dangling from her anklet swayed slightly on her feet wrapped in black stockings as she walked. She patted Nolan's shoulder and looked towards the group of hilly Churls in the distance, saying, "Oh, little adventurer, look, it's those inhuman beings from the Abyss Order. Ice Abyss mages. Nolan caught a faint whiff of a comforting and uniquely feminine scent, and his gaze fell on the Ice Abyss Mage who emerged at the back of the group of hilly churls, surprisingly at level 56. If he hadn't been discovered when he sneaked in earlier, he might have been turned into an ice sculpture in an instant. There they are. The Ice Abyss Mage was indeed more formidable than the hilly churls. It sensed the flow of elemental energy nearby and barely detected the faint traces of fire elemental energy left in the air. Yay! Receiving the instructions from the Ice Mage, the hilly churl people all rushed towards Nolan and their side. Their gazes were like a black tide, surging forward, and an overwhelming sense of fear rose in Nolan's heart. Damn! Who could withstand this momentum? Nolan's eyes narrowed slightly, feeling an impulse to climb up a tree immediately. But thankfully, the presence of Lisa beside him eased his mind a little. Manipulating the delusion, he released the fire element and condensed it into a fireball in his hand, then threw it over to the wooden shield of the shield-wielding hilly churl guard. Suddenly, the wooden shield was ignited, and the two hilly churl thugs in the front hurriedly stopped to pat out the flames. One of the hilly churl thugs wielding an axe in the back jumped into the air and descended towards Nolan and his group like a falling meteor. Hee, what a terrifying momentum! Lisa raised her palm covered by black gloves gently, and in the next moment, countless lightning elements gathered frantically from the surroundings into her palm, dyeing the sky purple. One of the lightning bolts formed by the lightning elements was guided by the iron axe and struck the falling hilly churl thug. Visibly, it paused in midair for a moment, the scorching pain and paralysis causing it to struggle in various futile attempts to alleviate the pain, but to no avail. It didn't take long. Not long after, all the lightning elements were compressed into a sphere the size of a thumb in Lisa's palm. The dense purple naturally turned black, like a singularity in the universe. Bang! The hilly churl, charred by electricity, crashed down. Your teammate defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 540 Adventure Express. The title of Honorable Knight took effect, and Nolan gained 30% of the Adventure EXP, while the group of hilly churls in front of them were also scared stiff, their gazes filled with fear as they stared at the singularity of lightning elements in Lisa's palm. Chapter 135, Precious Treasure Chest Containing Ore. The condensed purple-black sphere of lightning elements in Lisa's hand bore a resemblance to the gemstones hanging from her anklet. Watching the monsters intimidated by her power, Lisa gently pushed the purple-black sphere towards them. Like fluttering butterflies, the concentrated sphere of lightning elements became increasingly unstable as it flew, jumping up and down in a manner that seemed ready to explode at any moment. The monsters sensed an unprecedented crisis and began to retreat uncontrollably as they watched the slowly drifting purple-black sphere. Within a few seconds, they sprinted and frantically ran towards the camp. However, once the purple-black sphere had traveled far enough, it suddenly accelerated like a burst of light, piercing through the group of monsters like an arrow. Sizzle! The surface of the sphere emitted flashes of purple-black lightning, then suddenly erupted, consuming and annihilating everything around it like a black hole suddenly expanding. After a few seconds, there were no monsters left in front, not even a trace on the ground, which was now charred. Your teammate defeated powerful enemies *26, obtained 4235 Adventure Express. There were actually more than 20 large midi-churls, normal hilly churls, sama-churls, and whatnot, all adding up to more than 4,000 Adventure EXP for just one-third of them. If he had personally defeated them all, it would have tripled, totaling over 10,000. Nolan couldn't help but feel oddly complicated. Oh my, seems like I went a bit overboard. Lisa folded her arms across her chest, gently lifting her snow-white skin with ample curvature, while her hand brushed against the chestnut-colored hair hanging down on her left side as she chuckled. Indeed, she had gone a bit overboard. Now there wasn't even any loot dropping, let alone ground left. It's a pity. Facing such a terrifying scene, the other hilly churls in the Black Sun clan's camp were so scared that their legs went weak. Even the commands of the Ice Abyss Mage were useless, and they fled directly, abandoning their weapons and armor. Such powerful thunder elemental power, who the hell are you people? The Ice Abyss Mage's black masked face couldn't be seen, but its synthesized voice was very agitated. It couldn't understand how it had messed with such a powerful human when it was staying here peacefully. Could it be related to His Highness the Prince's plan to control the Wind Demon Dragon? It was the trainer officer resident in the Hilly Churls camp in charge of training them, and it had only heard a little about the Wind Dragon's plan, but it was not directly involved. Other than this matter, the Ice Mage couldn't think of any other reason that would cause someone to dare to mess with them. After all, most of the ordinary hilly churls in the Black Sun clan were not weaker than any human soldiers, not to mention those large-bodied miniaturals. Moreover, it was also a highly regarded elite figure in the Abyss Order. With such a terrifying lineup, whoever dared to come would be unlucky. And at this moment, it could sense that the human in front of it might be able to kill it in an instant. How absurd! Thinking of this, the Ice Abyss Mage already had the intention to escape. However, to prevent these two humans from detecting its intentions, it decided to first use magic to disrupt them. Kakik, foolish humans, meet your demise. Special attack, Frost Drift Offering. With the elemental shield activated, the Ice Abyss Mage chuckled maliciously, floating in midair as it raised its staff and cast a spell. An ice-white magic array appeared above Nolan's head, quickly guiding the ice element to condense into a huge block of ice before it smashed down under the effect of gravity. Lisa lifted her fair face and glanced at the ice block, taking 2 steps back with her legs slightly apart, clad in black lace stockings. Nolan naturally evaded easily. Boom! The huge ice block, despite being buffered by grass and soil on the ground, did not shatter but cracked into several pieces. Some of the smaller fragments flew onto Lisa's feet in high heels, and the icy sensation transmitted through her stockings made her furrow her brows slightly. The fine ice debris that slipped off her feet left a few dark watermarks on her black stockings. When Nolan turned his head to look at the Abyss Mage, he found it had disappeared without a trace. Oh my, what a cunning fellow! Lisa smiled unconcernedly. This kind of Abyss Mage whose strength was quite good could still quickly run away quite far using spatial teleportation magic, and it would take a bit of time to catch up with it. The most important thing now is to get the Storm Terror's tier and solve the problem of the Storm Dragon as soon as possible. To think it ran away just like that, without any fighting spirit. Nolan quipped, feeling somewhat regretful for missing out on a lot of Adventure EXP. Let's go, we'll go find that crystal tier. Lisa ruffled the tresses of her hair on the side of her ear and walked over towards the hilly Shural's camp, while Nolan led the way, following the remaining traces of wind elements. There were no surprises next, as they found a precious treasure chest in a simple wooden hut in the hilly Shural's camp. Unfortunately, upon opening it, they found that the valuable items inside had already been taken. It was now obviously being used as a storage box, filled with iron ore, amethyst lump, crystal ore, and the like. And that red crystal seemed to be treated as ore as well, placed among them. Since Lumen and Venti were not here, Nolan and Lisa had to avoid touching it to prevent injury, so they could only store the entire treasure chest into Lisa's vision. His delusion could only bear a weight of 10 kilograms, so it couldn't fit a chest filled with ores that probably weighed over 100 pounds. Lisa's vision, on the other hand, had no such issues, as the weight it could bear increased with the strength of its holder. According to what Nolan had learned on a regular basis, he roughly judged that for every level up, the vision holder would increase its load by about a kilogram. Alright, little adventurer, let's quickly go and meet up with everyone. Lisa said with a slight smile on her face. Walking on the way to the Star Snatch Cliff, Nolan once again brought up the question about whether it was possible to modify the Thunder Elemental Delusion. Though it will cost me a lot of energy, as long as there are enough materials, the modification isn't that difficult. But even if you have delusions with different elemental powers, it's very difficult to control them simultaneously to release elemental powers. You can only use them one at a time. Otherwise, if 2 different elemental powers accidentally collide, it could lead to some kind of elemental reaction, which could very well injure you. Lisa explained as she twirled the strands of hair falling on her cheek with her fingers. I see. Nolan nodded. He seemed to recall from the game storyline that Lumen and the Fatui Harbinger's child in the battle cutscene, she used both wind and rock elemental forces at the same time. Nolan couldn't do that, probably because he fundamentally lacked the true mastery of elemental powers like her. The elemental power stored in the delusion, he could only choose to pour it out or not pour it out, just like water in a kettle. Of course, even so, if he had 2 delusions with different elements, he could still create elemental reactions on his own, which would be quite useful. The slit on the side of Lisa's purple dress revealed black silk shorts, and her snow-white thighs were slightly exposed between the knee-high stockings and the shorts. She parted her lips and smiled, saying, "If you want to modify this Thunder Elemental Delusion, just keep an eye out for high-quality Thunder Elemental materials during your adventures, and you'll also need materials with the property of storing elemental power, otherwise, it won't be possible to modify it." Chapter 136, Purification. High-quality Thunder Elemental materials with the property of storing elemental power? All right. Nolan nodded in understanding. This kind of material didn't seem to be something that could be found overnight, and it really depended on luck. He could only heed Lisa's advice and keep an eye out for them during his adventures. Star Snatch Cliff stood high, allowing sounds to carry further with the wind, which was why Venti chose to summon the Storm Terror here. After all, the prerequisite for summoning also had to be for people to receive the signal of someone summoning it. Miss Lisa had been here before, so she teleported directly using magic, saving herself the trouble of traveling or running. At Star Snatch Cliff, Lumen, Paimon, and acting Grand Master Jean had been waiting here for quite some time. When they saw Nolan and the others, Paimon approached with a smug expression and said, "Hehe, it seems like you're still a bit slower than us. If I remember correctly, this place is not far above the Thousand Wines Temple, you guys came over on the way, isn't it normal to be a bit faster?" Nolan said with a smile. Hehe. Paimon didn't feel embarrassed and stuck out her tongue. "Lisa, is everything gone smoothly?" Grand Master Jean, with her legs clad in tight white pants, also walked over, her lips slightly parted. "Pretty much, encountered some minor troubles, but it's all taken care of." Lisa's fair arm crossed her chest as she lightly tapped her head. "In that case, it's just the Bard and Master Dai look missing." Paimon clapped her hands excitedly, floating next to Lumen. "Oh, I think I hear someone calling for me." A clear young voice came from below the mountain. Everyone looked over and saw Dai look draped in a black coat and his companion, Venti, dressed in green, slowly making their way up. "Aren't you the Anmo Archon? How come you're slower than Nolan and the others?" Paimon asked curiously. "We've already flown back all the way, how could we be slow?" The result was probably due to the fact that Miss Lisa's spatial teleportation magic is more powerful. Venti said with a smile on his face. "Lord Barbatos really knows how to talk." Lisa chuckled, covering her mouth with her gloved right hand. "Hehe, alright, bring out the volunteers you've collected, we still have to save poor Dvalin," Paimon said urgently with her hands behind her back. "Okay." Nolan nodded, then turned to the elegant lady beside him. "Miss Lisa, please bring out that treasure chest." He got it. Lisa's purple vision, barely perceptible against her snow-white chest, flashed slightly. A treasure chest appeared at her feet, adorned with black high-heeled shoes. "Wow! It's a precious treasure chest." Paimon's eyes, which looked like starry skies, were literally about to burst into stars. It would be great if there really was a treasure chest. Nolan lifted the lid of the treasure chest, and the red crystal lying on a pile of still unrefined ores were displayed in front of everyone. "Pfft, why is it all just stones?" Lumen, with white petals adorning her golden hair, couldn't help but laugh. "Perhaps that's just the irony of life." Nolan sighed briefly, then turned to her. "Lumen, purify it and then repair the holy lyre." The wind on Star Snatch Cliff was quite strong. The hem of Lumen's skirt was gently blown up, and the surrounding light seemed to dim in the presence of her snow-white thighs revealed above her knee-high boots. She took the red crystal from the chest. Not a moment passed. The gloomy and impure energy on the crystal was evaporated as far as the eye could see, and turned into a clear Storm Terror's tear. "It feels magical no matter how many times I see it. With this power, you, traveler, will surely shine in Teyvat in the future." Venti was quite emotional. After all, what polluted Dvalin was an abyssal power that even he, a god, found troublesome. "Shining in Teyvat is all well and good, but I just hope to find my brother." After purifying the tear of the storm dragon, Lumen gestured to Venti to hand over the collected red crystal. As for the one she and Grand Master Jean had gotten in the Thousand Wines Temple, it had already been purified. Venti handed the red crystal to Lumen, who quickly completed the purification. She then took out the holy lyre. As the tear of the storm dragon dripped onto it, the holy lyre was once again filled with pure and concentrated wind elements. "It feels like this is how it was meant to be." Jean looked at the rejuvenated holy lyre with a sense of youthful vigor. Dai look, with his red hair draped in a black coat, nodded. "So, can we summon the storm terror now?" "Of course, when Dvalin hears this familiar and wonderful music, it will definitely appear," Venti said with a smile. "Hehe, alright, I can't wait," Paimon said, clenching his fists and wriggling in the air. The current storm terror is probably on the brink of mental collapse due to the poisonous blood and the curse of the Abyss Mage. Dialogue may no longer be effective. When it appears, we need to find a way to control it and let Lumen purify it. Nolan gave everyone his advice based on the course of the game's plot and with reasonable speculation. Even in a weakened state, Dvalin has immense power. It will be difficult for us to control directly. If we forcibly intervene, it may harm it, leading to a rapid deterioration of its condition. Venti shrugged, looking dejected. Oh? Is there no other way? Jean's shawl kept swaying in the mountain wind, her snow-white back as well as her round and soft shoulders were hidden in it. Venti pondered for a moment, then looked at the golden-haired girl in a backless white dress. There is a way, but it involves a certain level of risk for the traveler. Ah, is the traveler in danger? Maybe we should reconsider. Paimon quickly waved his hands, sounding worried. Lumen stood with her hands on her hips, staring at the grass on the ground, shifting her gaze from left to right. After a moment of thought, she said, I don't want to witness separation or even loss again. This opportunity to save Dvalin is rare. I'm willing to give it a try. Ah, such a brave little cutie. Even I'm touched. Lisa smiled on her fair face, her legs wrapped in knee-high black lace stockings, turning her body to look at the green-clad youth. So what is Lord Barbados's plan? She asked. Very simple. When Dvalin is summoned later, Lumen will hide first. Once it appears, she'll seize the opportunity to climb onto its back and quickly attack the two venomous thorns there, purifying them. Venti explained. After everyone heard this, they all felt that it was indeed a simple yet dangerous plan. The Storm Terror was able to control the wind element, so trying to counterattack Lumen that climbed onto its back was simply too easy. It would also take some time to purify the poisonous thorns, during which time they would have to restrain the Storm Terror in order to prevent her from being harmed. Chapter 137, Summoning the Storm Terror. Can you guarantee the Lumen's safety? Nolan asked after some thought. There was no such dangerous operation as forcibly climbing onto the back of the Storm Terror in the game's plot. Don't worry, I'll help block Dvalin's attack, Venti replied with a smile, holding the holy lyre in his hand. In that case, let's begin the summoning. The breeze ruffled her blonde hair, Lumen's fair ears faintly visible, as she said with a light nod of her head indicating that there was no problem. Venti walked to the top corner of the Star-Snatch cliffs near the outermost edge of the mountain, and the holy lyre filled with pure wind elements emitted a soothing and crisp musical sound as he played. It wasn't long before a dragon roar came from afar, and the blue-colored figure swept past the trees below the Star-Snatch cliff, the terrifying pressure causing the little birds to panic and flee in all directions. Beasts and monsters underground also couldn't help but scramble. It's here. Nolan once again caught sight of the dreamlike and resplendent creature. It might soar up from below the cliff later. I feel like this is the chance to climb onto its back. It makes sense. This will also have a surprise effect. With my wind blessing, you should be able to climb up smoothly. Traveler, be ready. Venti nodded first, then turned to Lumen. This time, Dvalin, I will definitely save you. Just endure a little longer, please. Wendy looked affectionately at the approaching blue figure. Count me in too. I'll buy you time up there, Diluc said calmly, crossing his arms. All right, thank you. Lumen nodded in gratitude, then fixed her gaze on the rapidly approaching blue figure from below the cliff. Her white knee-high boots outlined her knees clearly, and as her body slightly lowered its center of gravity, she exerted force in her calves, leaping forward towards the Storm Terror's head. As Dvalin watched the small bug approaching, it roared angrily, opening its huge mouth to swallow the insect while shouting, Barbados, have you indeed allied with humans to hunt me down? No, Dvalin, we just want to help you. Venti used the wind element to push Lumen aside, narrowly avoiding the Storm Terror's bite. Taking advantage of the Storm Terror's distraction, Lumen used its head as a foothold and slid down onto its back. At the same time, Diluc also dryly jumped towards the back of the Storm Terror, and a gust of wind kicked up the huge cyan-colored figure to appear completely in front of the crowd. Barbados! Dvalin raised its head and roared angrily into the sky. At this moment, it seemed to feel betrayal once again. When it first awakened, Mondstadt's people didn't recognize it, and now, its former friends actually allied with others to hunt it down. How could it not be angry? This was betrayal. 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 Dvalin's enormous dragon eyes slowly turned crimson as the corruption of its poisonous blood deepened. All of you will be torn apart in the storm. Instantly, the sky darkened as black clouds gathered, accompanied by roaring winds and torrential rain. Eventually, they formed a massive tornado, spiraling upward towards the Star-Snatch cliff. Oh, my, looks like we're going to get wet. Lisa pressed down her pointed witch hat, a faint smile playing on her fair face. The front hem of her dress robe slid inward with the wind, revealing her legs clad in knee-high black stockings. As the skirt tails fluttered dramatically, the black lace shorts encasing her soft buttocks were also partially exposed. The acting Grand Master Jean raised her arm to shield her eyes. She saw Storm Terror condensing huge wind projectiles around itself, aiming them at the two on its back. Then, a blaze-wrapped sword light shattered the wind projectiles. But soon, the next wave of attacks followed. Kakik, that's right, that's it, Uranmo Archon has betrayed you, let your anger tear him apart. Suddenly two abyss mages appeared beside the Storm Terror, one on the left and one on the right, water blue and ice white, and one of them said in an enticing tone of voice to Dvalin. The already irrational Storm Terror became even more enraged upon hearing the abyss mage's words. The Abyss Order has indeed appeared. Nolan activated his golden eye of judgment, focusing on them. One was level 63, and the other was level 65, stronger than the Cryo Abyss mages encountered in the Black Sun clan. Wait, level 65? He remembered Fiskal being level 37, and he himself was level 27. Adding the two together would result in a maximum strength of level 64. But if that's the case, how could he see level 65? First of all, it certainly wasn't a case of hallucination. Thinking like this, the most likely possibility was that Fiskal had recently become stronger, so the effect of the ability gained from her Eye of Judgment had also increased. Humph, isn't this something we've long anticipated? Lisa pursed her lips and said. Lisa, let's deal with the Abyss Order. We can't let them interfere with the Traveler's purification operation. Jean drew a single-handed sword with a guard, seemingly a standard weapon of the Favonius series, a 4-star Favonius sword. She wrapped invisible wind power around the sword, and for a moment it was like holding a cyan-colored storm. Then, the storm began to spread outwards, blocking the violent winds and rain originating from Storm Terror. Lisa lowered her hand from her hat, and the catalyst, Favonius Codex, appeared beside her, its pages flipping automatically. Let's see how these lightning bolts feel, shall we? Lisa smiled gently, extending her right hand towards the two abyss mages in the sky. Several purple magic circles unfolded beside her palm. Sizzling electric currents flickered, followed by thunderstorms shooting upwards, hitting the elemental shields of the abyss mages. Such troublesome humans! The two abyss mages felt their elemental shields rapidly depleting and quickly teleport out of the range of the thunderstorm. When they reappeared next to Storm Terror, a cyan wind blade, condensed from wind elements, swiftly sliced through the ice abyss mage's shield. Boom! The ice elements on the shield instantly dispersed, depleting a large portion of it and freezing the nearby water abyss mage in the process. Impressive, as expected of the acting Grand Master. Nolan hadn't expected the acting Grand Master Jean to compress wind elements onto her blade and unleash a wind blade. It was quite impressive. Hee, adventurer buddy, the Abyss Order is in your hands. I have to go help the traveler and stopped by to have a good heart-to-heart talk with a friend I haven't seen in a long time. Venti said with a smile as cyan-colored wind elements converged around him, slowly lifting him off the ground and flying towards Storm Terror. All right, stay safe. Nolan drew his adventurer's hunting bow, fire elements condensing on the arrow tip as he aimed at the ice abyss mage. When it came to depleting ice elemental shields, fire elements were very effective. Chapter 138, Clearing the Clouds and Revealing the Sun. A faint flame disregarded the pouring rain and raging wind, darting through the air and finally crashing into the elemental shield of the ice abyss mage. The melting reaction between the two elements caused the elemental power in it to be drastically depleted. However, it was somewhat regrettable that, since this abyss mage was stronger than any Nolan had encountered before, the elemental shield containing ice elements was quite robust. Therefore, Nolan's arrow with the fire element attached to it did not have much effect on it. At this moment, the previously frozen Hydro Abyss Mage, now freed from its icy prison, spoke with a hint of anger. You foolish humans, there will be no mercy for you. Special attack, Bubbling Offering. Holding a blue ornate staff in its hand, it waved it towards the front, generating hundreds of transparent water bubbles, slowly but irresistibly surging forward like well-organized soldiers. Oh my, such pretty bubbles, hee. Lisa lifted her fingertips and flickered with a subtle thunder light, gently pointing forward. The thunder light was like a horizontal lightning bolt shooting out. In the air, the lightning kept branching out and intruding into the bubble formation. 1, 2, 3, every bubble hit by the electric current instantly burst, turning into water droplets that scattered onto the grassy ground. Jean closed her eyes, and the hurricane swirling around the Favonius sword intensified. Perhaps due to the fact that he was not far away from her, Nolan was able to feel a strong sense of oppression, as if it were gathering strength. At this moment, he didn't stop his actions. The second arrow, imbued with fire elements, was shot towards the Ice Abyss Mage. With the extraordinary characteristics of archery, the incredibly fast arrows basically had no possibility of being dodged, unless one predicted the point of impact in advance. For the Abyss Mage, who wasn't particularly skilled in physical abilities, dodging after the arrow was shot seemed quite challenging. While the Ice Abyss Mage was surprised that it was once again hit by a not-so-strong human in the district. Flames erupted before its eyes, but were perfectly blocked by the shield, only slightly obstructing its vision. It was about to mock the human when. At that moment, a massive wind blade, seemingly distorting space, slashed at the ice elemental shield, still lingering with the fire elements from the arrow. A large amount of wind elements enveloped the flames, instantly spreading and engulfing the Ice Abyss Mage in a red-hot tornado. As it felt the elemental shield rapidly depleting its ice elements, the Ice Abyss Mage cried out in some despair, "No, this can't be. Just a mere hum." Before it could finish saying human, the elemental shield of the Ice Abyss Mage suddenly shattered, overwhelmed by the backlash of magic, and as it was knocked unconscious, the spreading flames also consumed it. Your teammate defeated a powerful enemy. Obtain 1042 Adventure Express. Watching the acting Grand Master, who had just withdrawn her sword strike, Nolan couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It was worthy of being an existence whose strength was also a question mark in his eyes, so her strength was undoubtedly high, and her level probably wasn't low either. What? The other Hydro Abyss Mage paused for a moment, seemingly not fully grasping what had just happened. In such a short time, a comrade who was slightly stronger than it suddenly disappeared. Barbados. At this moment, the storm terror high in the sky once again let out a roaring sound, its huge dragon's mouth facing the sky as countless points of light coalesced towards it. With Nolan's experience, it felt like it was preparing for some big move. Could it be the one that destroys even the platform it's standing on in the game's story? Would it even lose the entire Star Snatch Cliff if it used it here? Why? No, we need to run. Seeing this situation, the Hydro Abyss Mage hurriedly prepared to use its skill to escape. It's not that simple. Miss Lisa, wearing her purple pointed witch hat, smirked, and with a slight grip of her fingers wrapped in black gloves, the lightning that had previously branched off to clear the water bubbles unconsciously spread towards the Hydro Abyss Mage. Then, it instantly converged and attached to the water elemental shield, with electric currents constantly flashing and consuming the water elements on the surface of the shield. In a continuous state of being hit, it was difficult for the Water Abyss Mage to use skills to escape under interference. In just a few seconds, the shield shattered, and the lightning engulfed it. From below, only a mass of purple plasma could be seen. Your teammate defeated a powerful enemy. Obtain 1025 Adventure Express. In such a situation, without any surprises, there would be nothing left but ashes. Traveler, hurry up. If Dvalin unleashes this move, it'll be terrible. Venti stood on the dragon's back and barely dispersed the wind bullets that were attacking towards Lumen. Almost there, don't rush. Behind him. Lumen stood with her legs apart, her weight shifted downward, her fair palms overlapping to form a vortex of wind, continuously attacking the giant poison spikes in front of her. The purification power she carried also played a role. One could see the poison spikes exuding some dark red filth that dissipated. Break already. Under the strain, sweat dripped from Lumen's forehead, sliding down her brow and nose, finally falling onto her soft lips, gradually seeping in through the crevices. It feels a bit salty. She exerted all her strength in the attack. Just now, she successfully purified one poison spike, and now this was the last one. As long as she could purify it successfully, Storm Terror would return to normal. So, hurry up. Faster. Although feeling the pain in its back, Storm Terror's rationality seemed to be gradually clearing. The attack it was about to release hesitated slightly. But due to not being fully awake, it instinctively gathered a supersized wind bomb beside it and shot it towards the few bugs crawling on its back, causing it immense pain. Diluc held his sword with both hands, dense flames gathering on the blade. The calm pupils of his eyes reflected the incoming green wind bomb. Here Dawn! He shouted loudly, swinging forward like a phoenix, the bird of fire colliding with it. Bang! Like comets colliding, fierce winds and flames suddenly spread, rustling the clothes of the people on the dragon's back. At the same time, a sound like shattered glass came from the poison spike. In Lumen's surprised gaze, it finally cracked open bit by bit. A few seconds later, like a cup smashing to the ground, it burst into pieces with a bang. Phew, finally done. Lumen squatted down slightly, breathing heavily. Purifying the poison spike was not easy, especially with Storm Terror vigorously twisting its body in an attempt to shake them off. The moment the poison spike was purified, the irrational frenzy in Storm Terror's mind vanished instantly, replaced by a feeling of clarity. It dissipated all the energy it had accumulated in its mouth, dispersing the storm it had maintained all this time. As a result, the gathered dark clouds also faded, a ray of golden sunlight piercing through the clouds and shining on everyone. Unconsciously, it was already dusk. Chapter 139, All right, let's go on a great adventure. Oh my, it looks like our little cutie succeeded. The golden evening sun caressed Lisa's legs clad in knee-high black lace stockings. She tilted her face slightly upwards, her emerald-like pupils gazing into the distant sky where a small black dot was slowly enlarging. When Storm Terror's enormous cyan blue body landed on the Star Snatch cliff, the powerful airflow it brought along blew Nolan's hair back. Indeed, it was quite big and beautiful. Nolan couldn't help but feel a bit sentimental. Unlike the attack on Mondstadt City, this time was a real up-close encounter with Storm Terror. Hehe, it wasn't easy at all. Paimon finally let go of her worries about Lumen, a smile appearing on her face. Paimon, Nolan. Lumen, wearing a backless dress, stood on the dragon's head, a smile on her fair face as she waved her arms at everyone. Then Dvalin tilted his body and also said to Nolan and the others, "Thank you all for saving me, please let me send you back." What, are you offering us a ride? Paimon's eyes lit up, sounding somewhat incredulous. Grandmaster Jean and Lisa exchanged a glance, arms crossed, and nodded slightly. Perhaps they confirmed that Storm Terror really no longer harbored any hostility. Ahem, let's go then, Nolan said with a light cough, his fist pressed lightly against his lips. Taking a ride on a dragon was something that everyone couldn't help but look forward to. What are we waiting for? Paimon couldn't wait any longer and flew over. After Nolan and the others boarded the dragon's back, they saw Diluc and Venti, who despite the intense battle, didn't have a speck of dirt on them. Storm Terror flapped its wings and took off, soaring vertically through the clouds. Wow, it's so high. Paimon, riding on the dragon's back, dared not float anymore. After all, she couldn't keep up with Storm Terror's speed, and there was a good chance she would be left behind. At this moment, standing on the blue dragon's back, she looked rather short and couldn't help but find it amusing. Hey, I saw that. What's with that look? Paimon put her hands on her hips and glared at Nolan. Do you want me to give you a nasty nickname too? Haha, that won't be necessary, Nolan chuckled awkwardly. He couldn't imagine what strange nickname Paimon would come up with, so it was better not to provoke her. Hehe, I think it's great. How about giving him a nickname like Strange Adventurer or something like that? Lumen blinked her ember eyes, her soft lips slightly parting as she smiled. So the two of you have come up with such distinctive names. Nolan couldn't help but feel a bit speechless. Dvalin, it's been a long time since we've flown in the sky like this, Venti said with some nostalgia as he sat on the dragon's head. I'm sorry for the trouble. Storm Terror remained silent for a moment, remembering the chaos it caused to the citizens of Mondstadt by unleashing the storm. You were once the protector of everyone as the Dragon of the East Wind. And if it wasn't for the Abyss Order taking advantage of the situation, you wouldn't have become enraged, so you can't be blamed for all of it. Venti's hand pressed on Dvalin's head, and the divine power that belonged solely to the Enmo Archon passed through. This is the power of the Enmo Archon's attendant, why? Storm Terror sounded somewhat surprised, continuing, I won't be recognized by everyone anymore. There's no need for this. Even so, from now on, you'll still protect everyone, won't you? I hope you can fly with more ease. Venti laid back with his hands behind his head, smiling. Mondstadt City, Knights of Favonius headquarters. Storm Terror had set everyone down outside the city to avoid being misunderstood by the citizens as another attack on Mondstadt. Diluc had already returned to the tavern, while Venti was catching up with Storm Terror. Only Nolan, Lumen and Paimon followed the acting Grand Master and Lisa back to the Knights of Favonius. Mainly because the acting Grand Master said she wanted to reward them. Perhaps the citizens still have many doubts about Storm Terror's attack. Tomorrow, I will represent the Knights of Favonius to clarify the misunderstanding to the citizens. Both of you, as honorary knights, have contributed a lot to this matter. Especially Lumen, without you, Mondstadt might have lost the Dragon of the East. Such achievements naturally deserve recognition from the Knights of Favonius. As for what it is, well, I haven't thought about it yet. Come in first, everyone. Jean's crisp voice echoed as she walked on the stone-paved ground in her white high-heeled boots. As she spoke, just as she was about to open the door of the Knights of Favonius, there was a sudden bang as the door was violently pushed open, and a fiery figure rushed out shouting. Hooray, since Acting Grand Master isn't here, let's go on a great adventure. Wait, Clay, there's still Storm Terror causing trouble outside. It's too dangerous to go out and play. Noelle, who was wearing a maid-style skirt and armor in the back, shouted somewhat anxiously. Hee, it'll be fine. Even against a big dragon, Dodeko can protect Clay, the lively girl with the red hat said, completely unaware of the figure standing in front of the door. She leaped forward, attempting to jump directly down the steps at the doorway, but just as she jumped, she suddenly felt her head bump into something soft. Hey! Clay rubbed her head and shook it, then opened her eyes groggily. Oh, it's Acting Grand Master Jean. Clay! Jean sighed slightly as she held her forehead. I'm sorry, Acting Grand Master. Clay knows she's wrong. I didn't mean to bump into your belly, Clay said, poking her index finger downward. Oh, you're back, Acting Grand Master. Noelle saw Clay being stopped by Jean and breathed a slight sigh of relief, patting her chest. Hi, Miss Noelle, long time no see, Nolan greeted Noelle with a smile. Oh, it's Mr. Adventurer. Noelle looked at Nolan with some surprise as he returned with Acting Grand Master and the others. Could it be that he was one of the two honorable knights that everyone was talking about who repelled the Storm Terror? Little Noelle, the matter of the Storm Terror has basically been resolved. If little Clay wants to go play, accompany her for a while, but it's already late, so don't go out of the city. Lisa, with her fair arms wrapped around her chest bundled in snowy white fabric, smiled as she spoke. Yay! Thank you Lisa. Sis. Clay instinctively almost said auntie but corrected herself just in time, narrowly avoiding a big blunder. Noelle-san, let's go. She grabbed Noelle's hand and ran off. Hey, little Clay, slow down. Lisa, wearing her purple pointed witch hat, pressed down the brim with her hand and sighed as she watched the two retreating figures. Am I getting too tired lately? My skin seems to be deteriorating. Why does little Clay keep wanting to call me auntie? What do you think, little adventurer? She looked at Nolan with her emerald-like pupils. Miss Lisa is worrying too much. Your skin looks very fair and soft, Nolan replied with great assurance. Chapter 140, a complete set of 4-star artifacts. In the Knights of Favonius Acting Grand Master's office. The golden sunlight streaming in through the window slowly faded, casting the room into darkness. Jean lit the candles on the candlestick, and the flames began to burn quietly. The room appeared brighter this way. Nolan, Lumen, and Paimon stood before her. Miss Lisa had already returned to the library next door. As honorary knights who saved Mondstadt from the crisis posed by Storm Terror, the rewards given must not be too stingy. What do you need? Jean asked from her seat behind the desk. The documents that were previously spread out on the table had been reduced significantly, presumably dealt with through a night of work. Grandmaster Jean, work very hard. Nolan was slightly emotional. Grandmaster Jean, are you saying we can ask for anything? Paimon's face lit up with anticipation. Yes, after all, you are already honorary knights. As long as the request is reasonable, the Knights of Favonius can fulfill it. Jean brushed her golden hair aside and nodded. Wow! That's great! Paimon happily spun in the air, then turned to Lumen and urged, Traveler, don't you want to find your brother? Now you can ask the Acting Grand Master for help. Lumen pondered for a moment and said, Yes, Acting Grand Master, if possible, please have the Knights of Favonius keep an eye out for my brother's whereabouts. As an honorary knight, it's just a small matter like this. Of course, the Knights of Favonius will help. You can mention some of your more urgent needs. Jean closed her eyes and slightly swayed her fair face from side to side, then looked back at Lumen and said, Acting Grand Master, you're so kind. Paimon exclaimed with delight. Thank you, Lumen smiled gratefully, then after a moment of thought, she said, I haven't decided what I need yet. How about you think of something, Paimon? Hehe, when you don't know what you need, you can always ask for delicious food. Paimon said with an experienced look, earning puzzled looks from the others. By the way, I noticed that you all seem to lack artifacts. How about letting the Knights of Favonius reward you with a set of artifacts? Jean interlocked her fingers, leaning her elbows on the table, and rested her chin on her hands as she pondered for a few seconds. Artifacts? Are those relics found in treasure chests, or secret ruins? And what does it mean by a set? Lumen asked, her arms wrapped in white sleeves pressed against her abdomen, her face showing a puzzled expression. Yes, Jean nodded, then seeing Lumen's apparent lack of understanding, she explained, artifacts are most commonly found in treasure chests, secret ruins. It's appropriate to call them relics. They are generally divided into 5 types: Flower of Life, Plume of Death, Sands of Aeon, Goblet of Aeonothem, and Circlet of Logos. Each person can carry one of each type, meaning a person can carry up to 5 artifacts. If some artifacts are of different types but share a common essence, then they are considered a complete set. Collecting 2 or 4 pieces can provide additional abilities. Jean briefly explained the knowledge of artifacts to Lumen. This includes 2 pieces of the same type of artifact, which can cause interference and cannot be carried simultaneously. For example, newly acquired artifacts need to be integrated with other artifacts for reinforcement to gain greater power amplification, and so on. So, Acting Grand Master Jean, are you planning to reward us with a complete set of artifacts? Nolan asked, somewhat surprised. In the past, the artifacts he obtained from treasure chests were either low in star rating or incomplete sets, and he didn't have much more to purchase additional artifacts for reinforcement. The initial state of artifacts doesn't provide much enhancement, so Nolan hadn't focused on improving his strength through artifacts. After all, almost every adventurer on Teyvat knows that unless you're extremely wealthy, it's not wise to be fixated on artifacts without sufficient mora. Enhancing one's strength with artifacts is akin to using mora to improve oneself. Just think, a 1-star artifact costs around 20,000 to 30,000 mora, a 2-star artifact is priced between 60,000 to 90,000, and a 3-star artifact costs between 150,000 to 200,000. Nolan had even found 4-star artifacts in treasure chests during adventures with Fiscal in the past. Although he had given them to Fiscal because he took the Primo Gems, it was said that a 4-star artifact was at least double the value of a 3-star one. And that's just for artifacts in their initial state. The cost increases when they're reinforced. For example, strengthening a 3-star artifact to its limit requires spending over 3 million mora to purchase additional artifacts to serve as reinforcement resources. Moreover, strengthening also requires the consumption of mora as a reinforcement medium, which costs about 50,000 mora, although that's relatively small compared to other expenses. Now that he was still a new adventurer, he didn't dare to hit any artifact without enough mora. Furthermore, artifacts themselves are quite rare and not readily available for purchase everywhere. And now Acting Grand Master Jean was saying they would be rewarded with a set of artifacts. Nolan almost thought he had misheard. Yes, just a set of initial state 4-star artifacts. Considering your achievements, don't think the Knights of Favonius are being stingy, Jean nodded, a faint smile appearing on her fair face. 5 4-star artifacts are worth around 4 to 5 million mora each. Furthermore, since they are a complete set, they come with additional set effects, which obviously increases their value even more. Thinking about it this way, the reward given is already quite good. In that case, thank you, Acting Grand Master Jean, Lumen replied after understanding about the artifacts. She also felt that they were quite suitable for her. In the future, when she finds lower star-rated artifacts from treasure chests in the wilderness, she can also treat them as resources to feed to the set. After Nolan also said that there was no problem. Acting Grand Master Jean explained that there is a registration process for rewarding those who have made contributions. However, it was already late, and the Knights of Favonius responsible for the registration had already finished work for the day, so they would have to come back tomorrow. In that case, if there's nothing else, we'll go back first, Nolan said with a gentle nod of understanding. All right, may the 1,000 winds of Mondstadt watch over you. Jean rose from her seat, her soft lips parted slightly as she offered her blessing. Hehe, you too, Acting Grand Master Jean, Paimon waved, then followed Nolan and Lumen as they left the Knights of Favonius headquarters. Outside, the sky was already showing the faint glow of the Milky Way formed by countless stars, as if it were just at the boundary between dusk and night. Nolan and the others walked back in the direction of Valberry Street. Paimon and Lumen were talking about how worried she was as she watched her from the ground, fighting Dvalin in the sky. The image of the scene was so vivid that Nolan almost couldn't hold back his laughter. Just then, his character panel suddenly popped up with a series of notifications.
Thanks for listening.